buy my kids a car, but I wanted them to have some personal equity in it.
That's good.
Personal equity.
I tell my daughter every time you can do it yourself, that's a good thing. And one time I did get a flat, and I, pulled over and I jacked up my car, and a policeman pulled up, and he's like, "Well, I'll change it for you." I'm like, "No, it's all right, I can change it." And he's like, "Well, no, I'll change it." I'm like, "It's okay, I can change it." He goes, "I'm going to change it because you didn't ask me to change it." All right, go change it. Sometimes I had a little problem getting the local stuff.
Are you sitting next to the
Show you a trick with that.
That's not our.
Semester through high school, and I showed them how to do it.
Someone who was official.
Oh, do you want to be right behind?
Oh, no.
You can be right there. Why don't you sit right here? This is our seat. You're right in, because then you're right behind it.
Okay.
Pick him.
As long as I get my paper that I read. Let's see.
This meeting will come to order. Today we have a hearing titled Response by Toyota and NHTSA to Incidents of Sudden Unintended Acceleration. We have a number of members who are present for this hearing who are not members of this subcommittee, but are members of the full committee. We welcome them, and I note that they will be allowed to submit written statements for the record, but will not be able to deliver opening statements. In addition, after all subcommittee members complete their questioning, full committee members will be allowed to ask questions. Members who are not on the subcommittee or the full committee are welcome to observe, but they will not be permitted to give a verbal opening statement or ask questions due to time constraints. I ask unanimous consent that Congressman Burgess be allowed to serve as ranking member for today's hearing. Without objection, the request is accepted. The chairman, ranking member, and chairman emeritus will now be recognized for a 5-minute opening statement. Other members of the subcommittee will be recognized for 3-minute opening statements. And Mr. Rush, the chairman of the subcommittee, the CPTC subcommittee, will also be allowed to give an opening statement along with the ranking member if they so desire. So we'll begin with the opening statements. I will begin. 10 years ago, this committee investigated the Firestone tire recalls, which caused the deaths of dozens of people and expressed vulnerabilities in the government's Oversight and Recall Authority. In response, Congress quickly passed the THREAT Act, which was intended to provide enhanced authority for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to gather and analyze data from automobile manufacturers and provide an early warning system for catastrophic defects. Now, a decade later, we face a serious auto safety problem that calls into question whether the THREAT Act is achieving the purposes we intended. Today's hearing will examine whether Toyota Motor Corporation and NHTSA acted in a timely fashion to address countless complaints of sudden, unattended acceleration in Toyota vehicles. Sudden, unattended acceleration describes a broad range of events in which a vehicle accelerates rapidly and the driver is unable to immediately slow down or stop the vehicle. Over the past several months, Toyota Motor Corporation has issued 2 major recalls for defects associated with accelerator problems in 8 popular models. The first recall, announced in October of 2009, addressed floor mats that can jam against the gas pedal, causing it to become entrapped in a full throttle position. Toyota eventually opened this floor mat recall to 4.26 million vehicles. And just last month, Toyota announced another recall of gas pedals that can stick or return slowly. Toyota's leadership has been ambiguous about whether these 2 recalls fully account for and address the problem of sudden, unattended acceleration. Thousands of Toyota owners whose cars were not subject to either recall have reported to the company that their vehicles suddenly surged or accelerated to high speeds. A staff analysis of documents Toyota provided to the committee shows that roughly 70% of the sudden, unattended acceleration events recorded in Toyota's own customer call database involve vehicles that are not covered by the floor mat or sticky pedal recalls. The fixes Toyota has advertised for this problem do not provide much assurance to these drivers. Our investigation has shown that Toyota repeatedly dismissed the possibility of electronic failures could be responsible for incidents of sudden, unintended acceleration. At the same time, Toyota provided software upgrades to certain vehicles to ensure that in instances where the gas and brakes were both depressed, the brakes will override the gas. It seems like this software upgrade provides important safety protection, but we are left to ask, what will Toyota do for the owners of its cars that cannot receive the safety upgrade? Equally troubling is that officials at NHTSA appear to have bought into Toyota's explanation of these events. In closing investigations and in briefings of committee staff, NHTSA has repeated Toyota's insistence that sudden unintended acceleration is caused by human error or limited mechanical problems rather than problems in the electronic system. NHTSA made this determination without having electrical or software engineers review the problem. One of our witnesses today will tell us how a NHTSA investigator sent to inspect her vehicle, quote, seemed to arrive with the preconceived idea to sell to us that it was a floor mat problem, end of quote. This begs the question of whether NHTSA is too cozy with the industry they oversee, or whether they are simply stuck in a mechanical mindset rather than evolving to keep up with the new generation of electronics and computer-run components. In an attempt to quell concerns that sudden unintended acceleration occurs, Toyota attorneys commissioned a study titled Testing and Analysis of Toyota and Lexus Vehicles and Components for Concern Related to Unintended Acceleration by a company called Exponent. Toyota has presented this preliminary report to prove that the electronic system cannot cause sudden unintended acceleration. However, this committee requested independent expert assessment of the Exponent study, and these experts identified numerous shortcomings, including the review did not follow sound scientific method. Major categories of testing, such as electromagnetic interference and radio frequency interference, were not addressed. Only one of the 7 vehicles used in the study was on the recall list. The study did not examine a single vehicle that had experienced sudden unintended acceleration. It is clear that the flawed Exponent study is nowhere near adequate or a valid scientific review. Toyota owes it to its customers, the American people, and government regulators to complete a comprehensive and scientifically sound review of their electronic system. One individual who has taken a close look at Toyota's electronic gas pedals is Dr. David Gilbert at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois. Dr. Gilbert will release his interim report showing how he was able to short-circuit the electronic gas pedal and mimic an unintended acceleration incident without triggering any diagnostic trouble codes in the vehicle's computer. Dr. Gilbert's report is the first study of this kind, and we're fortunate to have him and Mr. Scott Kane here today to explain it. In summary, what we found is quite troubling. Toyota all but ignored pleas from consumers to examine sudden unintended acceleration events. They boast in a briefing of saving Toyota $100 million by negotiating a limited recall. They claim that they first became aware of sticking pedals in late October of 2009, when in fact they had received numerous complaints many months and years earlier. They misled the American public by saying that they and other independent sources had thoroughly analyzed the electronic system and eliminated electronics as a possible cause of sudden unintended acceleration, when in fact the only such review was a flawed study conducted by a company retained by Toyota's lawyers. Toyota, and NHTSA for that matter, have a lot of explaining to do to the American people, to Toyota owners and dealers. I look forward to an informational and productive hearing. I next yield to the gentleman, I guess it's going to be Mr. Barton from Texas for an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Stupak. Just a little housekeeping before I give the opening statement. As you know, the ranking member on our side on this subcommittee is Congressman Greg Walden. He has stepped off the committee so that we can put Parker Griffith of Alabama on the committee. Therefore, for today's hearing, we officially don't have a ranking member, and I've asked Congressman Burgess if he would do that duty today, but to give the opening statement, it will be myself. Later this week, Chairman Waxman, I think, has indicated that he'll have a committee, regular business committee meeting in which we'll formally replace Mr. Walton. So that's why I'm here. Now,
well, but for today's hearing, Mr. Burgess will be ranking?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very well.
As soon as I give this opening statement. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to put my opening statement in the record in its entirety, so I'm going to speak extemporaneously. When the Republicans were in the majority, we held similar hearings on Ford and Firestone tires. So I felt, as the ranking member of the full committee, when Mr. Waxman and you approached me about these hearings, that it was only fair that the Republicans support this investigation. The American people do have a right to know, Mr. Chairman, and this subcommittee has always, regardless of which party controlled the Congress, and regardless of which member of this committee chaired this subcommittee, has got a great record of getting the facts on the table. And I will say on the record, Mr. Chairman, that you're one of the best at getting the facts on the record. Having said that, we do want to have an open mind on what the problem is. I was stunned to learn yesterday that, you know, it shows how long it's been since I've worked on a car, but I was under the impression that the steering mechanism and the fuel acceleration mechanism was like it was years ago, that it was mechanically linked. It's not. It's all electronic now. When you push that gas pedal, engineers actually have gone out of their way to create the feel of when it was linked, to show how old I am, to the carburetor. But it's really an electronic signal. There is no mechanical linkage. They actually create a spring-loaded system under the gas pedal to make it feel like when you push down on the pedal, you know, there's a linkage that's going into the engine, is going up to the fuel injection system, the carburetor, and making it work. It's all electronic. And the recall that Toyota is undertaking and the actual changes, the modifications, what they're doing is they're going in and shaving part of the gas pedal off at the bottom, and then they're putting a metal washer, an insert, behind the pedal so that it feels a little differently. They have exhaustively looked at the computer programs and the electronics to see if there is some computer malfunction. So far, they can't find it. Now, maybe there is, and like this study that you indicated, Mr. Chairman, you know, maybe there's something in their program that's wrong. But I was under the assumption, as an industrial engineer, that it was still a mechanical system, and there was something wrong with their design, or something wrong with their linkage system, or something wrong with their connection. Well, that's all electronic. And what we need to do, Mr. Chairman, you know, I don't believe that we should, and I'm not saying that you're attempting to do this, that we should go on a witch hunt. We should actually try to find out, in the true and best sense of protecting the American people, if there's a problem, what it is. If there's a problem, what Toyota is going to do about it. And if we do that, the American people will be well served. What we don't want to do, in my opinion, Mr. Chairman, is just assume automatically that Toyota has done something wrong and has tried to cover it up. Now, maybe they have, and if that comes out in these documents and in the testimony, I hope the Congress will come down on Toyota very forcefully. But if they haven't, you know, the people that I talk to have worked in the automotive industry for 30 years or more, and they have got absolutely no interest in covering up a problem that kills people, that hurts people, that endangers people's lives. But it appears to be that unless there's some electronic problem, it's possible that it could just be too many people putting too many floor mats in their cars. Now, I know that sounds silly, and it would seem incredulous to stipulate that that might be the problem, but based on the observation of the 16 million vehicles, I believe, that Toyota has investigated or has records on, they've had a handful, maybe a dozen, that have had some problem. So we need to find the facts, and I know, Mr. Chairman, you and Mr. Waxman are great at finding the facts, and myself and the Republicans on the committee are going to help you find the facts. And with that, I would yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Barton, and it's been a cooperative effort, and look forward to continue to work with you on this matter. Statement, Chairman of the full committee, Mr. Waxman, please. Opening statement, sir.
Chairman Stupak, I want to thank you for holding today's hearing on reports of sudden unintended acceleration in Toyota vehicles. I'm a great admirer of Toyota. Toyota makes good cars. I've driven one pleasurably and safely for years, and the company has been a strong corporate citizen. The Prius is a breakthrough vehicle that is making a crucial contribution to our environment and energy security. Perhaps that is why I'm so disappointed in the company's response to reports of Toyota vehicles racing out of control, too often with fatal consequences. Over the last decade, cars have become moving computers. They have dozens of microprocessors and millions of lines of code. This development has brought many improvements in vehicle performance and vehicle safety. Airbags are triggered by electronic controls. Electronic vehicle stability controls keep cars from swerving out of control, and fuel efficiency has increased. Like any advancement, the increased reliance on electronics can bring new risks, and these need to be carefully examined. But this did not happen. In preparation for this hearing, the committee analyzed over 100,000 pages of documents from Toyota and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. These documents show that both Toyota and NHTSA have received thousands of complaints of runaway Toyota vehicles, and they show that these complaints increased after the introduction of electronic throttle controls. But what is most significant is what is missing from the documents. There is no evidence that Toyota or the government agency NHTSA took a serious look at the possibility that electronic defects could be causing the problem. Toyota did not initiate a study into possible electronic defects until just 2 months ago, and NHTSA still does not have an electrical or software engineer on staff. Our review indicates that Toyota received as many as 2,600 complaints of runaway vehicles through its telephone hotline alone. Over 700 of these incidents resulted in accidents. Toyota had 3 responses. First, blame the driver. Second, blame the floor mat. Third, blame a sticky gas pedal. And NHTSA, without doing any meaningful independent review, accepted Toyota's explanations. Today we'll hear from Toyota's U.S. President, Jim Lentz, who will testify, and he has cooperated with our investigation, which I very much appreciate. He has said that Toyota was, quote, very confident that the fix in place is going to stop what's going on, end quote. As we will learn today, that seems unlikely. On our first panel, we're going to hear from Rhonda and Eddie Smith, who will describe Rhonda's harrowing account of driving a runaway Toyota vehicle. Their account does not sound like a driver error, a floor mat problem, or a sticky pedal. It sounds like an electronic defect. On the same panel, we're going to hear from 2 automotive experts, Kane and David Gilbert. They have been trying to identify possible electronic defects in Toyota vehicles. I'm not an electronics expert, but if what they say is true, Toyota vehicles have a serious flaw in their electronic control systems that leaves them vulnerable to sudden unintended acceleration. One question we'll ask today is, why didn't Toyota and the government agency do the kind of investigation that Mr. Kane and Dr. Gilbert have done? Toyota failed its customers, and the government neglected its responsibilities. Today we'll try to find out why. Given all that Toyota has achieved over the past 50 years, it would be wrong for Toyota to be permanently impaired as a result of the safety failures that have occurred. Toyota is a great company, and I hope it will have a great future. But fundamental reforms are needed in Toyota's leadership. Consumer complaints need to be taken seriously. The possibility of electronic defects must be actively investigated, and safety must start coming first. Fundamental reforms are also needed at NHTSA. The agency lacked the expertise and resources to critically assess Toyota's insistence that its vehicles could not fail. Ultimately, I believe addressing this problem will require legislation. Car makers have entered the electronics era, but NHTSA seems stuck in a mechanical mindset. We need to make sure the Federal Safety Agency has the tools and resources it needs to ensure the safety of the electronic controls and onboard computers that run today's automobiles. Again, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses so that as a result of this hearing, we can make a constructive step forward to correct this problem and make sure that future problems that may even affect people's lives are dealt with so that they will not occur. Yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next, to hear from the ranking member, Mr. Burgess of Texas. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you and Chairman Waxman for convening this important hearing. I thank our witnesses for being here. Thank you to the Smiths from Tennessee for sharing your compelling story with us today. So far, this committee has received thousands of documents from both Toyota Motor Company and the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration showing the complaints they've received over the years and their investigations into those complaints. While this committee's investigation is ongoing, it is clear that Toyota and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration received numerous complaints about sudden unintended acceleration in Toyota vehicles. And lately, you can't pick up the newspaper without reading a new announcement about a problem with a Toyota. Lexus, Camry, Prius, and now Corolla. In 4 short weeks, we heard in rapid succession that there was a problem with floor mats, then the pedals got stuck in the floor mat, and then the pedals themselves were sticky and stayed depressed even after the driver took his or her foot off the gas. Many of us are surprised at the swiftness, the breadth, and the depth of this recall by a company that really we're all familiar with for having had a good reputation as a car company that makes quality, safe products, and many owners are very loyal to the brand. In fact, last year, Toyota was the #1 in auto sales in the United States. Corolla is the #1 seller worldwide. Unfortunately, the issue at the heart of this hearing is not about loyalty. It's the battle between economics and safety must always come first. The economics of this debate says that Toyota made more money last year in a recession than any other automaker, over $800 million. And Toyota's infrastructure is built on 1,500 auto dealers in this country and numerous manufacturing plants, all of which provide 200,000 needed jobs in this recession. In fact, Mr. Chairman, I have a letter from my governor about the Toyota plant in San Antonio, Texas, and I'll submit that for the record. I am uncomfortably aware of the fact that this government, through the Troubled Asset Relief Program, has given $64 billion to prop up General Motors and Chrysler. This is an inherent conflict of interest, and it has only grown since last month when the General Accountability Office said that the American taxpayer would lose over $30 billion in their investment into those two companies. So we really are not just a disinterested panel of individual car owners and stockholders. This is why we need to get out of the business of bailing out business. But again, nothing should surpass the safety of the American consumer, which is why we are here. A document created by the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration staffer during the course of a 2004 investigation into sudden acceleration shows a spike in these problems starting in 2002, the year that Toyota put in electronic throttle control in some of its cars. We've also learned that State Farm noted an increase in claims related to unintended acceleration as early as 2004 and shared its claims data with the agency in 2006. Yet here we are 4 years later. There isn't a conclusive answer as to what caused the unintended acceleration. Is it Toyota's fault? Is it the fault of the parts dealer, the operator? These questions, of course, are cold comfort for the families who lost loved ones in accidents following an acceleration event, and they deserve answers. But even as we work now to figure out as soon as we can what happened, it is important that we get the full story and the correct answer so we can fix the problems going forward. We know that there were signals that Toyota and the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration both received in the form of driver complaints and warranty claims. We know NHTSA attempted to look into the issue, and for reasons I hope that Secretary LaHood will explain today, NHTSA did not find an electrical problem with Toyota's electronic throttle control. We also know Toyota did lots of testing and field investigations of these events and concluded that the problems were floor mats and sticky pedals, both problems that can be termed mechanical in nature. We do not yet have a good handle on what electrical tests Toyota did on its cars during pre-production. We do not know how Toyota reached a conclusion that the cars were not having electrical problems. We know that Toyota has recently hired an outside firm to run down these problems. But did Toyota do anything as these complaints were coming in? And if not, why not? I hope we start getting a better idea of Toyota's response to these questions today and a fuller picture of what is wrong with these cars. Toyota's reputation for safety and reliability has been stock and trade. I would say to Mr. Lentz, it's why people buy your cars and drive their families in them. It's why I own a Prius. We hope you can explain today why Toyota is confident that floor mats and sticky pedals have caused some of these events and what you are doing to figure out the causes of the other unintended acceleration events. I also welcome Secretary LaHood. He's always worked in a bipartisan manner, and I would like to publicly thank him for coming to my district last fall for a transportation event. His courtesy is always appreciated. But I do look forward to hearing Mr. LaHood explain why it seems that NHTSA has been engaging in a sudden acceleration of Toyota-related inquiries. Why the sudden ramp-up? What was NHTSA doing for the last 5 years as the drivers called the agency to complain about runaway cars? Were the Toyota complaints that NHTSA was seeing different in nature or number than the complaints related to other manufacturers? And I do hope we can get some insight into how NHTSA investigated these complaints. Thank you again, Chairman Waxman, Chairman Stupak, for convening this hearing. I know this will be a start of a long and multi-layered process to discover the truth and what initiated the recalls and what we do going forward to fix the problem for the American consumer.
Thank you, Mr. Burgess. Mr. Dingell for an opening statement, please.
Mr. Chairman, I commend you for this hearing. I thank you for your efforts. I will be asking yes or no questions today, and I hope no one will perceive this as discourteous or mean-spirited. And I know you will conduct a fair hearing, and I ask unanimous consent to insert my full statement in the record because I'd rather use the time for questioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dingell. Ms. Blackburn for opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to welcome Eddie and Rhonda Smith, who are from Tennessee, and I want to thank them for taking the time to come up today. We are appreciative of that. This hearing is of utmost importance, but I am starting to become a little bit concerned about the tone that is surrounding it. This should not be a trial, but rather a hearing to get to the bottom of some very important consumer safety issues, and I hope that that is how we will proceed. Every day we are hearing a combination of new information and, unfortunately, some new misinformation that clouds the debate, and my hope is that that misinformation is not being circulated for political purposes or to be hurtful. This is a very, very serious issue involving the loss of lives. In addition, it has resulted in the loss of jobs and the loss of thousands of paychecks are being sacrificed. Also, again, Mr. Chairman, let me say that this is too important an issue for us to play around with or to play politics with. And it's not a new issue. While I feel that many members of this body and unfortunately this committee are inserting themselves at the 11th hour, this is something that I have been working on for years. I have 3 letters that I sent in 2007 on this issue. I sent one to Chairman Dingell, another to Toyota, and another one to NHTSA, encouraging and urging this committee and the administration to look at the issue of unexpected acceleration in the Toyota Tacoma. In conclusion, I would just ask that we all listen to our expert panelists today in an effort to find out the truth and to draw reasonable conclusions as to how to best move forward to assess the lessons learned and to be certain that mistakes of the past are not repeated in the future. To do anything else would be irresponsible at a time when there is so much on the line. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I ask consent to submit my letters for the record.
Without objection, your letters will be submitted for the record. By unanimous consent, I'm going to ask Chairman Rush, who's chairman of the Consumer Protection Subcommittee, who has jurisdiction over NHTSA, to give an opening statement at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate you recognizing me, although I'm not a member of this subcommittee, but I do have an opening statement. Currently, there are more than 205 million licensed motorists in the United States. And as our families and workforce become increasingly mobile, our society has likewise become more dependent on the so-called smartness features, energy efficiency factors, and the safety of our automobiles. Understanding this reality all too well, automobile dealers and makers, especially manufacturers of the high quality that Toyota has historically represented, basically brag in all sorts of slick advertising that their vehicle is the biggest, the baddest, the boldest, and indeed the safest car on the road. So what happened to Toyota? Hear me when I say that I am profoundly discomforted and disturbed by the findings of our committee staff. My concerns, Mr. Chairman, go far beyond Toyota's safety practices and recall decisions. They extend to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's apparent sluggishness in reinventing itself. It appears as if NHTSA failed to assign an appropriate mixture of staff and resources to keep up with evolving, changing in auto design technology, especially with respect to increased computerization. I'm adamant about getting to the bottom of the causes for sudden unintended acceleration in Toyota's fleet of passenger vehicles. As chairman of the Commerce, Trade, and Consumer Protection Subcommittee, I will be conducting a separate hearing in March to look into further NHTSA resources, staffing, and management philosophies as part of that agency's reauthorization. Mr. Chairman, my sympathies and condolences go out to those families who have lost loved ones and certainly those consumers who have sustained grave injuries in crashes and accidents involving faulty Toyota and Lexus automobiles. I also extend these same sentiments to any automobile driver on the highways and streets and byways of our nation who had the misfortune of encountering one of these faulty vehicles. The fact is that when these motorists and passengers took the simple, routine step of getting into their cars, they had no idea that their trusted vehicles had the potential to become literally killing machines. This is beyond expectations, and this is totally unacceptable. I, along with millions of Americans, will be paying close attention to the answers given here today, as well as to your testimony, to their testimony before other congressional committees today and in the future. Quite frankly, if some of the alleged behavior and failure to act that I've read in the media turns out to be true, then Toyota is perhaps driving down the road to an inquiry by the Justice Department. Mr. Chairman, I promise all motorists, passengers, and pedestrians that my subcommittee will do everything in its power to restore confidence in NHTSA. And I will also work to ensure that affected Toyota and Lexus owners have full and immediate recourse to whatever equipment they need to remedy these safety defects. My hope is that consumers will once again have peace of mind when they turn on their vehicles and, yes, when they apply their brakes. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate this hearing and the opportunity to provide testimony at the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Rush. Mr. Gingrey for opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate this opportunity to offer a few opening remarks, and I certainly look forward to listening to the testimony of our witnesses as we seek to understand the full scope and impact of sudden unintended acceleration. While I believe that this subcommittee has a responsibility and a duty to thoroughly investigate this matter, including the responses by Toyota and by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, I would like to echo the concerns of others on the subcommittee that more could have been done in preparation for the hearing, even if it required a little bit more time to thoroughly vet a full range of witnesses review over 70,000 pages of documents, and more deeply look into the underlying complex mechanical and electronic issues. Certainly, we have an obligation to investigate potential threats, but we also have an obligation to get the whole truth, to apply wisdom in our deliberations. Additionally, I know some have expressed concern with the possibility that since the federal government now has a vested interest in some of our domestic auto manufacturers, it may have some incentive to highlight potential flaws with competing manufacturers. While I hope and I believe this is not the case, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean somebody isn't out to get me. We have to be cognizant of perception, especially in this post-bailout world, where the federal government has already placed itself in the business of picking economic winners and losers. Nonetheless, our first and foremost obligation is to the safety and the security of the American people. And if there is a problem here that can jeopardize people's safety and lives, we must identify it, understand it, and assure that it's addressed and it doesn't happen again. So I look forward, along with my colleagues, to listening to and very carefully considering the testimony of our witnesses as we seek to get to the root of this issue. Mr. Chairman, I thank you, and I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Gingrey. Mr. Markey for an opening statement. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Like millions of Americans, I drive a Toyota, a Camry hybrid that has thus far not been recalled. Like millions of Americans, one of the reasons that I purchased a Toyota in the first place was its stellar reputation for safe, reliable, and fuel-efficient vehicles. And like millions of Americans, I am troubled by the series of revelations that has led us to today's hearing. And as the recalls continue, I also find myself wondering what went so wrong. The October 2009 recall of more than 4 million vehicles due to floor mats that were entrapping accelerator pedals raises troubling questions about what Toyota knew and when they knew it. While the government seemed to have first started to investigate this problem in 2007, I have learned of a Lexus recall undertaken by Toyota in the United Kingdom in the year 2000 because, and I quote, there is a possibility that the driver's side carpet mat may rotate around the central fixing and interfere with the operation of the accelerator pedal. And then in Canada, in 2003, Toyota Celicas were recalled because, quote, the driver's floor mat may slide along the interior floor carpet when pressure is applied to the mat by getting in and out of the vehicle. As a result, the floor mat may come into contact and interfere with the accelerator pedal. If Toyota first learned that this could happen 10 years ago in the UK and then again in Canada 7 years ago, why didn't it do something before additional fatalities and other serious accidents occurred? Toyota's response to increased scrutiny of its safety record leaves much to be desired. In recent days, we have learned of internal documents that cite Toyota's success at limiting the outcome of the government safety investigations, which reportedly saved $100 million. Saving money should not come at the expense of saving lives. And finally, many safety experts who have reviewed complaints regarding sudden acceleration in Toyota vehicles do not believe that floor mats and sticky pedals can fully account for all of the complaints. And some have speculated that there may be more problems, particularly in the areas of the vehicle's electronic controls. While Toyota asserts that its outside experts found nothing wrong with their car's electronics, those tests were based on incomplete examinations of only 6 vehicles. Clearly, much more must be done. The question is whether the problem with these vehicles is due to how you put your boot on the gas pedal, or whether it's because Toyota needs to reboot the electronic software in its cars. That's what this hearing will be all about, and that's what the reforms will be that we ultimately pass as legislation. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Markey. Mr. Sullivan for an opening statement. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. I first want to thank Chairman Stupak and Ranking Member Burgess for holding this hearing. I'm pleased to be part of this important discussion as consumer safety, and in this case in particular, auto safety, is extremely important to our nation for many different reasons. With well over 250 million passenger vehicles on the roads, safety must remain our #1 priority, and statistical information indicates that we are meeting that goal. Over the last 50 years, significant technological advances in the design and construction of automobiles and reasonable federal regulatory initiatives have increased overall road and vehicle safety. As a result, fatalities and serious injuries resulting from motor vehicle crashes in the U.S. are at the lowest level in 49 years, despite constant growth in licensed drivers and registered vehicles. Over the past week, I had the privilege of visiting and speaking with a Toyota dealer, Jim Norton, in my district, and saw some of these problems and their remedies firsthand. While vehicle safety must remain our goal, I think it is important, too, to hear all sides of the story, look at all available data, and examine the entire process before we jump to any conclusions at the expense of one manufacturer and potentially do more harm than good by misleading the consumer with presumptions based on unfinished studies. Thank you in advance to our panel before us, and it is my hope that our discussions here today does what it's meant to do by shedding light on the situation so that we can maintain the U.S.'s position as the world's leader in auto safety. And I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. This side, Mr. Doyle for an opening statement. Mr. Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. Mr. Chairman, this investigation is not intended to attack any one person or one company. This investigation is to see if the cars we drive are safe. It's to help us determine whether car manufacturers have done all they can do to ensure our safety, and it's to determine whether the regulators did all they could to double-check their work. That should be the focus of this investigation, and I know we have 3 panels, and I look forward to hearing from them. Thank you.
On this side, we have other members who are here but are not members of the subcommittee and are welcome to submit a written statement. And thank you for being here, Mr. Shimkus, Mr. Booyer, Mr. Whitfield, and Mr. Terry. Thank you for being here. On this side, next would be Ms. DeGette for an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you need to look no further than me to find a loyal, long-time Toyota owner. I have 3 Toyotas, and I have 2 daughters. My 1988 Camry is the car that I brought my 20-year-old daughter home from the hospital in, and it's the car she drives now. Most recently, after years of satisfaction with the cars that the Toyotas, I was excited to get one of the very first Camry hybrids. And imagine how I felt when my staff came in and told me what Toyota told us to do if the accelerator sticks and we can't slow the car down. How did we get from 1988 to this? While Toyota has always had great consumer loyalty, and, as they will remind you, a low percentage of safety recalls in the U.S., persistent questions exist. When and how did Toyota learn of these acceleration issues, and how did they respond? Was this revealed to U.S. regulators, and how did they respond? What was the role of NHTSA, and did they take this investigation seriously? Did they make a deal with Toyota that limited a tough and thorough investigation? Has Toyota adequately analyzed all of the potential consequences of unintended acceleration, including whether or not electronic throttle systems may be part of the cause? Do the recalls to date encompass the entire problem? Now look, these questions to me, they're not partisan questions. They're questions all of us should be asking on behalf of our constituents who drive Toyotas and, like me, have been satisfied Toyota customers for many, many years. And in the end, for me, the answers to these questions are not academic, and here's why. In less than 2 months, my 16-year-old daughter will be getting her license. And the car that she's going to be driving is the 1994 Camry wagon. So let's get this right. Let's make sure these cars are safe for all American teenagers and adults to drive. I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Christensen, opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After years of buying only American-made, make and model cars because I was also trying to be a responsible global citizen, when it was time to replace my 12-year-old car, I went in search of a hybrid. I decided on a Prius, but ended up with a cute little Solara convertible, soothing my conscience by reminding myself that Toyota made cars in this country, and then, of course, of what was then your stellar history for safety, quality, and service. To tell you how I felt about my car, when that commercial asked, when you turn on your car, does it return the favor? I used to be able to answer yes. Now I'm wary as I drive it, and when I go online, all I find out is that it's no longer being made, which is really not enough. We Solara owners also need to know if there's ever been a problem and what was done to correct it so that we know we don't have to worry. But that's not the most important part of my story. The one that gives me sleepless nights right now is that my 2 daughters and 3.5 grandchildren drive in Toyota-made cars every day. A 2006 RAV4 and a 2005 RX 330 Lexus. So I want to hear from Mr. Lentz and Secretary LaHood assurances that they are and will be safe from any manufactured cause failures, and that if they have a problem, they won't have to go through the ordeal that Mr. and Mrs. Smith had to go through. And I want to say that I do appreciate the efforts Toyota is undertaking, but it's too late for the family in San Diego, and only by the grace of God do we have an intact Smith family here with us today. So it'll take much more than your press releases and lobbying, and I must say that those of your lobbyists with whom I have worked with, I have great respect for. But it's time for you not to just rebuild your image, but to rebuild our trust. And I hope that you'll be able to do that quickly, not just for Toyota's good name, but for the lives you carry in your cars every day, and for the many direct and indirect jobs you provide in the United States and the families that those jobs support. I also want to use this opportunity to say to other car manufacturers, because Secretary LaHood will attest that similar complaints come in on every make of car, that I also depend on all of you to put quality and safety over profits, to do the right thing by all of us consumers, to respond to complaints immediately, to investigate the complaints fully, and not to wait to be asked or to be made to issue a recall, but to do so early when lives are at risk for whatever reason. And to the NHTSA and all who have regulatory authority, we need you to exercise that authority as though the lives of your children and grandchildren, like mine and countless others, depend on your decisions. I want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Smith for their persistence and for being here today to tell their personal story, to welcome Mr. Kane, Mr. Gilbert, and Mr. Lentz. Secretary LaHood, when you arrive, it will always be good to see you and have you back. Thank you, Chairman Stupak and Ranking Member Walden, for ensuring once again that we fulfill our oversight responsibility on yet another very important issue in such a timely manner. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Mr. Green for an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing today on the recall of Toyota vehicles. And I'd like to recognize a person in the audience when I was much younger as a state legislator in Texas, Joan Claybrook, who is here and a former administrator, I think, in the Carter administration of the highway safety issue. Mr. Chairman, I think with opening statements, you're going to hear personal stories from our own members, but also I think express our disappointment in the federal and Toyota's response to the initial accidents. And on a personal note, like my colleagues, I have to admit I've always driven Chevrolets. But the second generation of my family, my 2 children, who are now adults, actually drive Toyotas. My son loves his Toyota Tundra. In fact, he's on the second truck, and it's built in Texas, he tells me. I remind him my Tahoe, for Chevrolet Tahoe, is also built in Texas. So I guess that's what the frustration is that Toyota's had such an image of perfection. And if there's a problem, fixing it. And we know from at least the publicity and from the hearing testimony that I've reviewed that fell down. And that just wasn't what people expected. Since national attention was brought late last summer, Toyota's recalled more than 6.5 million cars for two different problems. But as we hear from our first panel today, Mr. and Ms. Smith, this issue was present in Toyota cars for several years, and we're here today to examine whether Toyota and the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration responded in a necessary and timely manner. Mr. and Ms. Smith, I want to thank you for being here to recall your harrowing experience and shed some light on the problems you faced when you tried to bring this to the matter to the attention of both Toyota and the government officials. The two separate issues that caused the recalls of Toyota vehicles were so-called pedal entrapment and the sticky pedal. In September of 2007, Toyota first issued a recall for all-weather floor mats in Lexus and Camry vehicles that caused the pedal entrapment. While this took place over 6 months after NHTSA initially opened its investigation into the pedal entrapment issue, response to the recall was low. It took another crash due to pedal entrapment, luckily not fatal, for NHTSA to urge Toyota to reissue the recall notice in January of last year, 2009. Unfortunately, the recall was still not widely responded to by consumers, and even a dealer who last August loaned a car to a Mark Saylor and his family. The loaner car had a floor mat from a different model that trapped the accelerator. After that crash, NHTSA determined Toyota addressed the issue more thoroughly than just replacing floor mats, which resulted in a Toyota recall of vehicles in October of 2009 and expanded in November to reshape or replace the accelerator pedal for 4.26 million vehicles. What we need to look at today, and I hope some of our witnesses can answer, is why neither NHTSA nor Toyota realized there was not enough clearance for the accelerator when the issue first came up in 2007, and why this issue was not addressed more quickly. The second issue of the sticky pedal did receive a quicker response, and I commend Toyota for bringing information to NHTSA before an investigation was opened for quickly issuing a recall. There are, however, other issues in Toyota vehicles that have been reported to NHTSA involving accelerator problems. It's important that NHTSA investigate these issues thoroughly before dismissing them. To do that, NHTSA must have the necessary resources to hire staff to investigate all issues, whether it's mechanical or something in the electrical system. I look forward to hearing from today's witnesses on what we can do to support NHTSA's mission and what changes are being made following this series of recalls. And again, I want to thank the witnesses for being here. And, Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this very timely hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Ms. Sutton of Ohio for an opening statement. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this important hearing. For almost every American, buying an automobile is one of the most important purchases, the biggest purchases of their life. Consumers spend countless hours researching vehicles as they prepare to make this large and important purchase. And why do they do that? They do that because they know they need a vehicle they can count on. They know that they will need a car to transport them as they go about their daily lives. And most importantly, they want to know that they have purchased a car that will transport the most precious cargo that they have, which is their family, their children. Trust is a fragile thing. It's hard to win and it's easy to lose, and it finds its hold in promises kept and honesty sustained, which is why the problems that the millions of Toyotas have been experiencing have been so shocking. As documents have become public, we've learned that Toyota has been aware of these problems for years. It was revealed this week that Toyota officials took credit for saving $100 million by successfully negotiating a limited recall on floor mats with NHTSA several years ago. Consumers deserve better. It's unacceptable when companies and importers pay more attention to their costs than to the safety of their customers. According to NHTSA's data, 34 people have died in the past decade in crashes that may have been caused by sudden unintended accelerations in Toyota vehicles. Toyota and NHTSA have received thousands of complaints involving unintended accelerations from across the country. Yes, this hearing is extraordinarily important. In many instances, consumers were told that they installed the floor mats incorrectly. But the installation of floor mats can't possibly explain thousands of complaints. Recently, Toyota identified a problem with sticky pedals and are currently altering or replacing these devices. But the committee's investigation has revealed that Toyota's own counsel stated that a sticky pedal, quote, typically does not translate into a sudden high-speed acceleration event, end quote, which leaves Americans wondering about the extent of the problems. Toyota says that the problems are not related to the electronic throttle control system. But 6 years ago, NHTSA compiled data that showed that Toyota Camrys with electronic throttle controls had over 400% more vehicle speed complaints than those with manual controls. These are very concerning issues that we have to get to the bottom of. There is little doubt that Toyota's disappointing actions and the disappointing things that have come to light in the course of this investigation have to be looked at, and they have resulted in the loss of sales for this company. And I am very concerned that they will also result in the loss of jobs for workers who have done nothing through the fault of their own to face that potential consequence. But for the safety of all Americans, this recall needs to be done right, and the problems need to be fixed, and the American people need to have the solace of knowing that NHTSA and Toyota are giving the highest of priority to ensuring the safety of the vehicles and the precious cargo that they carry. And I yield back.
Thank you. Next we'll hear from Ms. Schakowsky of Illinois, member of the subcommittee. Ms. Schakowsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all of our witnesses for coming. I want to just specially note David Gilbert, who teaches in my state as an associate professor of automotive technology at Southern Illinois University. I look forward to the testimony of all of our witnesses. And like my colleagues, I'm extremely concerned about the circumstances that bring us here today. I'm concerned that Toyota put unsafe products on the market. I'm concerned that federal regulators had knowledge of unintended acceleration in some Toyota models in late 2003, as Secretary LaHood has acknowledged, but that it took 3 years before an initial investigation into floor mat problems was started. I'm pleased that Toyota has taken action on the issue of pedals being caught in floor mats, as well as the issue of sticky pedals, and that recalls have followed. But I remain concerned about reports of other unintended acceleration incidents that don't fit neatly into either of those categories, and that the company has dismissed those reports. If there's a problem with the electronic system that controls acceleration, we need to know what it is, and it needs to be fixed immediately. We've also heard reports that State Farm Insurance reported Toyota acceleration problems to the Department of Transportation in 2004, and that since 2000 there have been more than 2,600 complaints about unintended acceleration in Toyota vehicles and possible links to 34 deaths. I'm concerned about whether NHTSA has had the resources necessary to sufficiently investigate these complaints, and I look forward to hearing from my former colleague, Secretary LaHood, about what he needs to effectively rebuild the agency. In the coming months, Chairman Rush and I, as the Vice Chair of the committee, will be working on NHTSA reauthorization. And the pieces of the puzzle that we're talking about today are critical to our discussions about the future of the agency and whether it needs additional resources in terms of funding, expertise, or authority. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Thank you. Last but not least, member of our subcommittee, Mr. Braley of Iowa. 3 minutes for an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to make this clear at the beginning in response to some of the concerns mentioned on the other side of the aisle. I am an equal opportunity consumer safety advocate. I think every manufacturer that sells products in this country should be able to justify that they are doing everything they can to ensure that those products are safe and protect consumers from harm. That includes American automobile manufacturers and foreign automobile manufacturers that do business in this country. But here are some questions that I think American consumers deserve answers to at this hearing. One, why has Toyota, with the deserved reputation for its commitment to excellence and safety that you've heard mentioned here today, why do they refuse for so long to seriously address the possibility of a failure of its electronic throttle control system as a contributing factor to sudden unintended accelerations? Two, once this committee began its investigation of this problem, Why did Toyota turn to its product liability defense attorneys at Bowman and Brook to hire its independent expert, Exponent Inc., to analyze this problem? 3, was the interim report produced by Exponent Inc. to justify Toyota's position the equivalent of junk science? And how much credibility should it be given by this committee and American consumers? 4, is NHTSA, with its important jurisdictional responsibilities, capable, without major changes to its funding and its staff, of making an independent determination of the underlying causes of this problem, given the changing nature of the automobile industry and the increasing reliance upon electronic and computer data? 5, is there data available in these vehicles that is being withheld from the American public and from regulators of public safety that would give us clues into the underlying cause of these problems? And I'm talking specifically about the black boxes that now provide countless amounts of data and yet are protected from public disclosure in every attempt to try to find out what type of computer data might be available to try to justify and explain why these problems happen. These are some of the questions I hope that American consumers get answers to today, and I ask unanimous consent to submit my full statement for the record, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, your statement, all statements of members will be in the record, will be submitted for the record. I misspoke. Mr. Welch is a valuable member of this subcommittee. I didn't see you down there, Peter. So if you have an opening statement, 3 minutes.
Very brief. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. There really is one proposition that's not negotiable, and that's the safety of the American people, the American consumer. And that proposition requires us to ask 2 questions. Is the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration up to the task of the job? What do they need to do in order to do that job better? Second, what did Toyota do, and did it do it soon enough, and is it doing it now aggressively enough? But this question of protecting the public does require a governmental response, whether it's involving a car or a toy manufactured from China that's imported here and used by our kids. And the fundamental responsibility is both, when it comes to safety, is both with government to have agencies that are looking out for the interests of the American people, and government has been woefully inadequate in doing that, not just in some consumer safety issues, but even in financial products like subprime mortgages. And Mr. Chairman, I'm glad our committee is back on the job. But secondly, we have an obligation to be fair to all concerned. That's to the dealers, to the manufacturer, to the folks who work, in my case, Toyota dealerships in Vermont. I've had a chance to speak to Dave Birmingham, Karen and Dan Luno, who are very proud of the work they do. 640 Vermonters work in this. So this hearing is going to make certain that we get to the bottom of these questions about the government and about Toyota, but it has to be fair to all concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Let me also thank other members of the committee who are present but are not members of the subcommittee but are interested in this hearing and are here, and their presence is appreciated. Mr. Gonzalez is here, Mr. Engel is here, and Mr. Gordon's here. Thank you for being here. If you want to submit any written opening statement, we'll be happy to receive it. That concludes all of our opening statements. Before we have our first panel, Mr. Lentz of Toyota has been here with some of his staff, and they were courteous enough and didn't want to interrupt the opening statement, so if they'd like to come forward and have a chair in open chairs, we'd be happy to have them. I always appreciate it when witnesses, no matter what panel they're on, will sit through a full hearing so they get a full flavor of our hearing. So if Mr. Lentz and his staff would like to come out, that'd be great. We'll recess for a minute while they do that. There's about 6 seats up front here. If you'd like to take the seats up front, that'd be great. Holy Christ, I know they're a big company. How many people they got? Let me call our first panel of witnesses. On our first panel, we have Mr. Sean Kane, who is President of Safety Research and Strategies Incorporated. Dr. David Gilbert, who is an Associate Professor of Automotive Technology at Southern Illinois University. Eddie and Rhonda Smith of Sevierville, Tennessee, who own a Lexus ES350 that experienced sudden unintended acceleration in 2006. I ask the witnesses come forward. It is the policy of this subcommittee to take all testimony under oath. Please be advised that you have the right under the rules of the House to be advised by counsel during your testimony. Do any of you wish to be represented by counsel? Everyone indicating and nodding their head no, so I take it as a no then. Now I'm going to ask you to please raise your right hand to take the oath. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this matter to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and matter pending before this committee. Let the record reflect that the witnesses replied in the affirmative. Each of you are now under oath. We will hear a 5-minute opening statement from our witnesses. You may submit a longer statement for inclusion in the hearing record. Mr. Smith, if you don't mind, you want to start? Or would you like Mrs. Smith to start? Rhonda, you want to start first? I'm going to ask you to pull that mic up. Turn on that light there. The green light should go on. I understand you're going to go 5 minutes and you're going to give it to your husband and he's going to go 5 minutes. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. When you're ready.
Okay.
Thank you for being here.
I would like to begin by thanking the honorable members of this committee and also Mr. Sean Kane and his staff for inviting us here to testify today regarding the much publicized sudden unintended acceleration, or also known as SUA, that has been and is currently being experienced by Toyota drivers not only in the United States but all over the world. SUA has been the cause of numerous deaths and will continue to be unless addressed by this committee, Toyota and NHTSA. We truly appreciate this opportunity to share our story now, since we've attempted numerous times since October 2006. My name is Rhonda Smith, and this is my husband.
Mr. Chairman, can we get the microphone up? It's hard to hear her.
Sure. Just pull it just a little closer.
Is that better?
Try that, yes.
Okay. My name is Rhonda Smith, and this is my husband of 38 years, Eddie Smith. I'm a retired social worker with the state of Tennessee, and Eddie is a senior vice president at a bank in Sevierville, Tennessee. I'm truly thankful to be here today, and I feel I'm speaking on behalf of those who've lost their lives needlessly, unnecessarily. And I would like to share an incident with you concerning SUA that I experienced October the 12th, 2006 in our new Lexus ES350. This car had 2,728 miles on it when the incident occurred. The vehicle had a keyless push-button ignition and required a key fob to be present inside the car in order for it to start. On that Thursday, October the 12th, 2006, and I am going to read this because I tell you it still upsets me today. I was driving from my home in Sevierville down Highway 66 to the Interstate 40, and upon entering the interstate, I accelerated with everyone else into the flow of traffic. And at this point, I merged over into the second lane, not going into passing gear. At this time, I lost all control of the acceleration of the vehicle. The car goes into passing gear and the cruise light comes on. At this time, I'm thinking that maybe the cruise is what caused the car to keep accelerating as my foot's not on the gas pedal. I take off the cruise control, but the car continues to accelerate. To make a long story short, I put the car into all available gears, including neutral, but then I put it in reverse, and it remains in reverse as the car speeds to over 100 miles per hour down the interstate. I place both feet on the brake after I firmly engage the emergency brake, and nothing slows the car. I figured the car was going to go its maximum speed, and I was going to have to put the car into the upcoming guardrail in order to prevent killing anyone else. And I prayed for God to help me. I called my husband on the Bluetooth phone system. I knew I'm sorry. I knew he could not help me, but I wanted to hear his voice one more time. After 6 miles, God intervened. As the car came very slowly to a stop, I pulled it to the left median. With the car stopped and both feet still on the brake, the motor still revved up and down. At 35 miles an hour, it would not shut off. Finally, at 33 miles per hour, I was able to turn the engine off. Thank you. After my husband arrived, he found nothing unusual about the accelerator or the floor mats. But the strange thing was that the dash lights and the radio were still on. After the wrecker arrived, we gave the vehicle fob to the wrecker driver. When he hooked the car and prepared to winch it onto the rollback, he asked my husband to put the car in neutral so he could start the winch. The driver was standing 20 to 25 feet away at the rollback controls. Without thinking, my husband sat down in the car without the key fob and was able to shift the car into neutral, which he shouldn't have been able to do. But when he did that, the car actually tried to start itself. We have a notarized statement from Tommy Clayton, the wrecker driver, attesting to this. Toyota said they would inspect our Lexus and contact us. After 10 days, we still had not received a call back. We called again and got the same assurances. Toyota promised us they would look into our complaint several more times over the next few weeks. When we finally forced Toyota to respond in writing, we received a 5-sentence analysis stating, and I quote, "When properly maintained, the brakes will always override the accelerator." Well, we know that's a lie. And we were outraged that Toyota would suggest in that statement also that the brakes had to not properly be maintained in order for that to happen. And the car had less than 3,000 miles on it. Once again, we contacted our dealer and expressed our disgust with Toyota's handling. They recommended that we contact NCDS, which is the National Center for Dispute Settlement, and ask for an arbitration hearing. Our NCDS hearing was a total farce. The representative for Lexus was Mr. Leonard St. Amand, their Tennessee district field technician. Mr. St. Amand, although only an hour away in Kingsport, did not show his face, and he attended via speakerphone. He insisted that he could not recreate the incident and that I had more than likely caused this problem by standing on the brakes while spinning the tires. Well, of course, we were furious that Toyota called us liars a second time. NCDS denied our claim for a total refund of our purchase price for this possessed car, which is all we were asking for. In mid-March 2007, we turned to NHTSA for help. Mr. Steve Chan and Mr. D. Scott Yon, safety defects engineers, responded. Mr. Yon took over our claim and seemed to be receptive of our concerns that sudden unintended acceleration in Lexus vehicles could cause serious injury, and we told them possibly death at that time, that somebody was really going to get hurt. We furnished pictures of the car and documentation of what had transpired since October 2006. On April the 11th, 2007, Mr. Yon flew to Knoxville, Tennessee, and drove to Sevierville to inspect the car. My husband will address that in a moment. Since neither Toyota nor NHTSA took us seriously, we tried to alert the public through the news media back then. We contacted numerous news agencies, a lot that are probably here today, and we tried all types of media, only to have one local station take an interest in our claim that Toyota and NHTSA were ignoring the deadly problem. Only one local station, Don Dare with WATE-TV, Channel 6 in Knoxville, did the story, which aired spring of 2007. We repeated our strong belief that the problem was somewhere in the electronics. After the Santee, California crash that killed a California highway patrolman and his family, WATE-TV did a second story on Toyota's sudden unintended acceleration. This was broadcast in February 2010, showing our original interview and a current interview. We've never wavered from our belief that our problem was electronic, not wandering floor mats. We forwarded this 2010 video to Toyota and NHTSA and received no response. In early 2008, we reluctantly let go of our mission to persuade Toyota and NHTSA to deal with the problem because the effort was too traumatizing. But we're here today because for the first time, we feel our story has been given more than a token attention. Unfortunately, it took almost 4 years and injuries and lives lost to prompt Congress to take up this important issue. In 2006 and 2007, we hoped that our efforts might spare others the unnecessary terror and pain of an SUA incident. And it pains our hearts deeply to realize that we failed, but this failure is surely shared by Toyota and NHTSA today. In our view, they've demonstrated an uncaring attitude and disregard for life. The results have been tragic, and today, I must say, shame on you, Toyota, for being so greedy, and shame on you, NHTSA, for not doing your job. It's our hope that this testimony will help all of Toyota's customers in a way that Toyota has not yet done to this day. Once again, I'd like to thank this committee for taking the time to listen to our story. It's about time we were heard. And I hope that Toyota and NHTSA will be held accountable for the poor decisions that have cost some people their lives. We'd also like to ask this committee to set a higher standard for NHTSA to be held more accountable in the future. And I thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Mr. Smith, your opening statement. Please pull that mic up. And
good morning. No, I'm sorry, it's good afternoon. Good afternoon. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank the honorable members of this committee for inviting us to testify today and to share our sudden unintended acceleration experience along with my thoughts and feelings. As my wife told you, my name is Eddie G. Smith. I'm the husband of Rhonda, who you just heard speak. We purchased this 2000 Lexus ES 350 because of Toyota's exemplary claim of safety, as we have young grandchildren. It has been a true experience trying to decide what to say today. You've all heard my wife describe her experience. Now take a minute and put yourself on the other end of a cell phone, listening to what you think are the last words you will ever hear her speak, and the imminent death of your lifelong best friend and spouse, and not being able to do anything about it. Besides this being the most terrifying and traumatizing experience of my wife's entire life, it was also the most frightening and heart-wrenching thing I've ever experienced. Needless to say, she was spared by the grace of God and is still by my side today. We have never been crusaders for any cause other than our God, family, and freedom. However, we have been on a mission to get this injustice to the American people noticed, addressed, and fixed. Toyota was informed of this potentially deadly problem in 2006 and was warned by us numerous times that lives would be lost if this was left unattended. We phoned, emailed, and wrote numerous letters trying to get Toyota to correct the sudden unintended acceleration problem. Our complete customer satisfaction that we received, as Rhonda said, was a statement from Toyota stating If properly maintained, the brakes would always override accelerations. They called us liars. Next, Toyota pushed us to arbitration with the National Center for Dispute Settlement. This was one of the biggest wastes of my time and my wife's time and money we have ever seen. It was a complete setup meeting to try and make us go away, and we didn't. Once again, we were called liars and actually accused of ruining our own brakes and transmission. This had the complete smell of a pre-arranged decision by Toyota and NCDS. Now we have NHTSA. As you know, NHTSA, by their own admission on their website, is that it is our U.S. administration responsible for reducing deaths, injuries, and economic losses resulting from crashes. Their mission statement is to save lives, prevent injuries, and reduce traffic-related health care and other economic costs. At first, we got the good, warm feeling that someone actually did believe us and cared enough to try and prevent any further possibility of loss of life. They even made a trip to inspect our vehicle. We finally felt our government would actually step in and bring Toyota to task and resolve this issue, thus sparing others from going through the experience my wife went through. Were we ever wrong again? Now their claim was it was probably the floor mats. Thus a massive mail out of small orange warning stickers to place on the rubber mats. This was their fix. After reading Mr. Yan's report, we realized that NHTSA had only sent him to sell us on the idea that this problem was not electronics, rather a floor mat. They went through the motions and tried to appease us with this absurd theory. I was present during the complete investigation by Mr. Yan. The floor mat test referred to in Mr. Yan's report, as you have all read, was a complete fabrication of the truth. This never happened and was never shown to us at any time during his visit. Once again, we felt we had only received lip service. Now that lives have been lost and sudden unintended acceleration seems to finally be an admitted electronic issue, why does Toyota and NHTSA not remember Rhonda Smith's pleas in 2006 for someone to take heed and fix this killer problem? My point from all this is to say that for purported reliable and safety-concerned companies such as Toyota claims to be, they sure took the easiest and cheapest route on the electronic issue brought to their attention by us in 2006. How many American lives should have been spared? My customer satisfaction from Toyota and NHTSA consists of an extremely traumatized wife. I was labeled a destructive, lying idiot, and I paid the repair bill to fix the brakes, rotors, and drums on our 2007 Lexus. Many have experienced sudden unintended acceleration, and unfortunately some are not allowed today to be able to tell their story. Rhonda is here today to testify before this committee for all those who have died and their families. Hopefully some justice will finally be served. To Toyota, I say your quality and safety record has been totally destroyed by your past and present words and actions. Now your integrity has come into play. How are you going to handle this? We are here today to help see that you don't shove the American people under the rug again and that your true colors are finally revealed. To NHTSA, I feel you have totally failed the American public, and I personally feel you, as our government watchdog, need to stop feeding from your Japanese bowl. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Kane from Safety Research and Strategies. Your opening statement, please, sir.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Stupak and members of the committee.
Hold that up a little bit closer.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Stupak and members of the committee for holding this important hearing and for inviting me to come and testify before you today. I'm the president and founder of Safety Research and Strategies. We're a research and advocacy firm that specializes in automotive and consumer product safety issues. In addition to providing factual research to attorneys, engineers, corporations, and government, we leverage our understanding of those safety issues to advocate on behalf of consumers. That's part of my company's mission. That's what I've been doing for nearly 20 years. I've been invited here to really help the committee and understand how did we get here today with Toyota unintended acceleration, how this problem unfolded, and to address the various related electronic issues that seem to be part of this issue today. For the record, I'm submitting our report, Toyota Sudden Unintended Acceleration, which provides a detailed examination of the issue. We released our report on February 5th, and we added an addendum on the 19th to provide the committee and the public with context for the crisis that's been really in this making for many years. I'm also submitting a preliminary report, Toyota Electronic Throttle Control Investigation, which we commissioned with Automotive Technology Professor Dr. David Gilbert of Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. Dr. Gilbert's preliminary report provides critical insight into the fail-safe detection capabilities of the electrical circuitry designed to prevent unintended acceleration in some electronic throttle control vehicles manufactured by Toyota. In our report, we look at the complexities and inconsistencies in the public record. Almost everything we have been informed by is in clear view and in the public record. It's difficult to find sometimes, but we spent a lot of time reviewing those records. And what we've concluded from the records that we've examined is that neither Toyota nor the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has identified all the causes of sudden unintended acceleration in Toyota and Lexus models, nor has the automaker implemented remedies that address the types of complaints that consumers are reporting, and that concerns us greatly. We're really concerned about the unintended acceleration circumstances that many drivers and witnesses have reported to Toyota and their Lexus models and how they've been handled. They're rooted in the fact that many of these incidents don't relate to the recalls. In our analysis of about 2,263 complaints, we found that nearly half of those complaints fall outside of any recall whatsoever. Listening to the experiences of the Smiths at a Lexus that raced down a highway, they're fortunate to be here today. Others are less fortunate. The problem may be rare, but it's serious. Jeff Pepsky of Plymouth, Minnesota, he petitioned NHTSA to investigate the defect in his Lexus. He also experienced unintended acceleration at a highway speed. To try and bring his car into control, he put his foot underneath the pedal to pull back on the pedal. He had carpeted floor mats in his car. Neither one of those relate back to these recall issues. If it was a sticky pedal, that pedal would have returned with a foot. If it was a floor mat, it would have been crept up and forward, and it would have to have been a all-weather floor mat. He had carpeted floor mats in his vehicle. Years of mounting evidence, including 8 NHTSA investigations, 6 of them at the request of consumers. Countless unintended acceleration incidents that were summarily dismissed by Toyota's driver error or floor mats yielded only a couple of small recalls. It took a horrific crash, one that we all know about, that occurred on August 28, 2009, that killed a CHP officer and his family. That haunting 911 call. It was a watershed moment in this crisis. Toyota's neglect and their failure to address these root causes, and by the NHTSA's failure to thoroughly investigate some of the consumer claims, despite the steady stream of these claims, it's hard to understand why a CHP officer couldn't bring that control to his car. The evidence in NHTSA's public record is ambiguous. If it was a floor mat, Toyota is guilty of failing to acknowledge a very serious and real consequence of pedal entrapment for years. Since the agency pointed out in 2007 investigation, drivers could easily stop a runaway vehicle. The very fact that a mispositioned or incorrect floor mat could even cause this kind of problem, this significant outcome, speaks volumes to the way Toyota has handled the safety issues today. The simplest of problems, a floor mat interference, hasn't been handled appropriately. If the floor mat didn't confine the pedal, then Toyota Lexus owners have a real cause for worry that their vehicles have an unidentified defect constituting a severe safety hazard. Based on our surveillance of the complaint data, which is in the public record, extensive interviews with consumers who have experienced SUA, the benefit of a scientific statistical analysis by the folks at Quality Control Systems, we chose to focus our attention on the electronic throttle control system, which is often called drive-by-wire. Following an SUA incident, consumers frequently report to Toyota dealers that their field technical specialists could find no vehicle-related problems. Specifically, they report the absence of what's called a diagnostic trouble code, a DTC, an error code. Toyota's consistently argued that its electronic throttle control design and fail-safe systems were built with multiple redundancies and that electronic throttle cannot malfunction with its diagnostic system without it catching an error in employing fail-safe modes. In response to NHTSA, the company flatly rejected the concept of unintended acceleration. In fact, they stated, I quote, "With regard to allegations of unintended acceleration, Toyota does not believe that uncontrolled acceleration can occur without the driver applying the accelerator pedal. If an abnormal condition occurs, such as the ETC, the electronic throttle control, sending the signal to the throttle body to open the throttle without applying the accelerator pedal due to a failure of a component or a malfunction of the system, or if the throttle simply were to open on its own, the system would go into fail-safe mode." Because drivers' real-world experiences were running counter to what these statements reflect, and Toyota's unshakable belief that their system was infallible, we felt it was important to examine that malfunction detection system and the fail-safe capabilities of Toyota's vehicles with ETC. As a result, we commissioned some research in this area. The findings are still very preliminary, but they're urgent. The urgent nature of them has had us working long nights and weekends with Dr. Gilbert to get the preliminary report to this committee. We've learned from Dr. Gilbert's preliminary study that there are conditions in the Toyota and Lexus models tested in which the redundancy of electronic circuits in the electronic throttle control are lost, particularly in what's called the accelerator pedal position sensor. Losing circuit redundancy in the system creates a loss of fail-safe modes that Toyota has programmed, and notably, the system will not detect an error. No DTC, no diagnostic trouble codes are found. Once this happens, you've now loaded the gun. In this state, lacking a redundant fail-safe, various scenarios can be introduced in the electronic control module, the computer, that read wide-open throttle without any input from the driver, and again, without setting a single diagnostic trouble code. No errors. This should never happen. Simply increasing voltage to the pedal position sensor while in a compromised state can induce this uncommanded wide-open throttle condition. These scenarios can occur because Toyota's fail-safe parameters are broad. The design allows a wide window of opportunity for problems to occur that are not seen as abnormal by the computer. Dr. Gilbert's testing demonstrates that vehicles can react to sensor errors in ways that appear consistent with consumer complaints of unintended acceleration. We must emphasize that at this point, it's going to take additional research to make the connection between the two. But his work provides an important baseline for understanding potential electronic root causes of unintended acceleration in Toyota vehicles. At this point, we simply have two bookends. One end of it is Dr. Gilbert's analysis, which finds there are holes in the Toyota system that can allow these failures to occur undetected. On the other hand, we've got reports from folks like the Smiths, whose clearly their incidents are related to electronic problems, and yet no diagnostic trouble codes are found when these cars are brought in.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up.
So how do we get here today? We got here today because, like many large-scale problems, they're complicated, they're multifaceted, they're multi-root cause. There's no one simple solution. At this point, there's much work to be done, and we believe that both Toyota and National Highway Traffic Safety Administration play a role in how we got here today. But this is squarely Toyota's problem. They created this crisis, and this problem has been festering beneath the surface for years. It took a crisis, and it took a crash that captured the nation's attention to get this in a place where it is today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Mr. Gilbert, your opening statement, please. I'm going to ask you to turn that mic on and pull it towards you more.
Chairman Waxman, Subcommittee Chairman Stupak, and honorable members of the Committee on Energy and Commerce, I thank you for holding this important hearing and allowing me the opportunity to testify before you today. Excuse me. Like so many of you have expressed, I have nothing against the Toyota Motor Company. They have a fine reputation of building a traditional line of very dependable vehicles. They've been very supportive of the school, which I work. I thought enough of the product brand to put my son in one. And so with that said, a little bit about myself. I've been a technical educator involved with automotive diagnostics and troubleshooting for almost 30 years. I've been witness to many evolutionary changes over that time. When I first began teaching at Northeastern Oklahoma A&M College, electronic fuel-injected vehicles were relatively new. Over the years, automotive technologies continue to progress from fundamental mechanical systems to more sophisticated electrical and electronic systems. Now, as an automotive technical educator at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, I found electrical diagnostic skills to be supremely important in diagnosing and repairing modern automobiles. And I have spent many hours studying and analyzing new circuits and components. Based on my knowledge of real-world failures and components, I purposely duplicate multiple types of electrical problems in donated vehicles for my students to study and diagnose. This provides my students with an opportunity to analyze wiring schematics, service information, and actively diagnose problems. SAU Automotive Technology graduates have found employment in virtually every aspect of the automotive industry. Students graduating from SAU have the technical skills to work closely with automotive design engineers to ensure reliable vehicle service in real-world situations. I believe the exemplary student placement record is a result of the rigor of the program, and the emphasis is on problem solving. It stands to reason, then, that my daily teaching responsibilities would include application and understanding of electronic throttle control diagnostics. I had the unique perspective in my employment to research and study multiple vehicles and electronic throttle control system diagnostics. In this preliminary report, my initial findings question the integrity and consistency of Toyota electronic control modules to detect potential electronic throttle control system malfunctions. The absence of a stored diagnostic trouble code in the vehicle's computer is no guarantee that a problem does not exist. I instruct all my automotive students with this fundamental statement. You can have a code with no problem, and you can have a problem with no code. My curiosity with Toyota electronic throttle control systems began simply with a search for the truth concerning unintended acceleration. I recently purchased a 2010 Toyota Tundra, and with the growing attention in the media to what seemed to be increasing events of sudden unintended acceleration, I made the decision to investigate the foundation of these claims on my own. Based on my working knowledge of electronic throttle controls, I did not expect the system to be easily fooled without detecting a circuit fault and setting a diagnostic trouble code. It was late one evening when I made a startling discovery. Electrical circuit faults could be introduced in the electronic throttle control system without setting a code. The discovery opened a window of opportunity within the electronic throttle control system for a potential problem without a code. Without a code set, the vehicle computer will not logically enter into a fail-safe mode of operation. All vehicle manufacturers have recognized the importance of electronic throttle control systems to perform exactly as they intended. Since the vehicle computer will only react to defective sensor inputs outside the range of the program limitations, if the circuit is defective, as far as the computer is concerned, it must be good. Knowing properly operating electronic throttle control systems and components are vital to safe operation, I proceeded to investigate the problem with much more urgency. Because of its role to accurately convey the vehicle driver demands for throttle opening, accelerator pedal sensor voltage inputs need to be confirmable by the vehicle's computer as absolutely correct. A complete or partial failure of these electrical circuits, sensors, wiring, or actuators in combination with an absence of fail-safe strategies could potentially result in a runaway engine. The importance of these issues raised in electronic throttle control system fail-safe strategies should not be underestimated. Sudden unintended acceleration of vehicles is a very serious safety concern that needs to be addressed without delay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert. Well, that concludes testimony. We'll go to questions. I'm going to start with the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Waxman, please.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all the witnesses for your testimony on this first panel. Toyota has maintained over and over again that it's not the electronics, it's not the electrical system. There are other reasons to explain the sudden unintended acceleration. But the only document that they gave us to address the phenomenon of sudden unintended acceleration in a systematic way was a report from this month done by a outside engineering consulting firm called Exponent. And we've asked people to evaluate Exponent's analysis, and they said it was not a very good analysis. In fact, they thought it failed to follow a scientific it failed to stand up to a scientific evaluation. So if Exponent's analysis doesn't adequately explain things, we need to find another explanation. Now, we're going to hear from Mr. Lentz, and he is going to say to us that we have designed our electronic throttle control systems with multiple fail-safe mechanisms to shut off or reduce engine power in the event of a system failure. We have never found a malfunction that caused unintended acceleration. That's Mr. Lentz's testimony. We're going to hear it in a little bit. Dr. Gilbert, you've given us a preliminary report. You looked at an alternative explanation to test this hypothesis. Briefly and in layman terms, what did you find? That it is possible to have electronic failure?
First off, it requires a thorough understanding of the system. The accelerator pedal position sensor input into the PCM is an input directly from the driver. If that circuitry or if that sensor is in error, then it's quite possible that that command that's being given to the vehicle's onboard computer will be accepted as a valid request to open the throttle. As a result of that, that's where I focused my investigation at the very beginning.
Well, they have a fail-safe built in. Are you saying the fail-safe failed?
The fail-safe will only come into play if the vehicle's onboard computer is able to detect a fault in the circuit. What my preliminary findings have shown is that there is a large amount of leniency in the programming of the fail-safe strategies that will allow certain abnormalities to occur without the vehicle's onboard computer being able to detect that a fault exists.
Is this like an electronic short between two pedal sensors that could override the fail-safe, meaning that a failure would not be read as an error and would not cut off engine power in a sudden unintended acceleration situation?
It could be interpreted as a short. Yes, it could.
So in other words, you discovered a scenario where a failure in Toyota's accelerator pedal sensors would not trigger an error code and would not cut off the engine power in the event of a failure. How long did it take you to discover this problem? Did you spend millions of dollars and spend years studying it?
Well, if I might say, after 30 years of automotive technology teaching and electronic engine controls, I discovered it in about 3.5 hours.
3.5 hours?
Yes.
And how much money did this take for you to spend to come up with this conclusion?
With the equipment that I had on hand, basically very little, if anything.
Well, it's really astounding because what you're describing are findings for us that relate to reports of sudden unintended acceleration. And my understanding is that you did this, but Toyota did not. Did you report your findings to Toyota? And have you heard from the company about your report?
Yes, sir, I did. I placed a call to Toyota in California through the channels that I knew. And days went by without a reply, and eventually they did call me back, and I talked with, I'm told, some engineers with Toyota, and I told them exactly what I had done and expressed my concern for this type of a problem. And in that conversation, I told them that, specifically, I said, what I've done is I've introduced a fault within the electronic system that should have been detected as a circuit fault, set a DTC, and reduced engine power.
Now, can we say with a certainty what you've concluded is the absolute cause for the sudden?
No, sir. What this does is this opens the opportunity to have other problems occur without detection.
So the essential point here is that if Toyota didn't believe this could happen, they didn't look for it. They looked for other explanations. The driver was stepping on the pedal, the floor mat was a problem, the pedal was sticky. They didn't look at the fact that the electronic throttle might have been a problem because they had a fail-safe, but they didn't look to see if the fail-safe failed. Mr. Chairman, I just think that we need to look at all the explanations and not put blinders in the way, which Toyota apparently did in trying to assess the reason for a serious problem in many of those vehicles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Waxman. Mr. Barton for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I want to ask some questions to Mr. Gilbert, but I want to ask Mr. and Mrs. Smith some questions first. I listened to your testimony, or watched it on television in my office, so I've been participating visually in the hearing, even though I haven't been here in person. Mrs. Smith, when your car was going down the highway, it just kind of went crazy. That's a very non-technical term, but and you apparently did everything you could. You tried to put it in neutral. You tried to turn the ignition off. You put both feet on the brake, and it just kept going. Isn't that right?
That's correct.
And somehow God intervened, and it slowed down, and you finally got out of the car. When you called the Toyota people to come, did they take physical possession of your car?
We didn't call the Toyota people.
Oh, you didn't call the Toyota people?
No, we just called. We had AAA.
Okay, well, did anybody inspect the car to see if there were physical cuts in the wiring, or somehow the electrical components had been shorted out? Did anybody do that inspection?
May I answer this?
Yes, sir.
I was in my vehicle trying to catch up with her, which was impossible, or just at least to be there. When I got there, she was still sitting in the vehicle. I inspected what a man would normally inspect to see if there was anything wrong, which includes floor mats, and this was not a floor mat problem.
Right. I'm not.
My answer to your question is, we had the car towed to Sevierville and then directly to the Lexus dealer in Kingsport, Tennessee, on a rollback wrecker. No one touched the vehicle until it got to the Lexus dealership. Now, were there wires cut? Were there not wires cut?
I'm not insinuating anything.
Yeah, we don't know.
No, I'm not. I'll stipulate that your testimony is credible. You had a runaway vehicle. It wasn't caused by a floor mat problem. It wasn't caused by you putting your foot on the pedal and going to sleep. Something went wild in your car.
Yes, sir.
So what I'm trying to figure out is based on what Mr. Gilbert said. He's created some sort of a fault situation in the electronics, and I was just interested if anybody inspected your car after the fact to see if, in fact, there was a short circuit. And again, I looked under the hood of a Toyota yesterday, and there's so much stuff under there now, I couldn't work on one if my life depended on it. So, I don't know how but I would assume if Toyota actually inspected your car, they would have torn the thing apart trying to find out what the problem is. Did that happen?
No, sir. Mr. Lamont, he was the field technician for Lexus that was sent to Kingsport. His report back to us was there was nothing wrong with it.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, has my time already expired?
Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, because I see I'm minus 4 minutes and 20 seconds. So
no, it's go ahead.
Okay. Now I want to go to Mr. Gilbert. Yes, sir. The minority has not had an opportunity, the minority staff, to interview you. We only found out you were going to testify late yesterday afternoon. But it appears, just looking at your biography, that you're very credible and respected in the industry. If I understood what you said, you decided on your own to look into this, or did Toyota approach you and ask you to look into this?
I did this on my own.
You did this on your own?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you actually went out and bought a car, or you got access to a car?
I should explain a little bit. Toyota Motor Company has been very generous with vehicle donations. We had a number of Toyota vehicles in the fleet that, and they're listed in the report, that were donated for educational purposes, and those were at my disposal. So one of the first vehicles that I looked at was a 2007 Toyota Tundra. which is similar to the vehicle I purchased. And that was part of my interest.
But, I mean, you got access to some Toyotas now.
Absolutely.
From what little minority staff and myself have been able to evaluate your testimony, you're saying that there could be some sort of a electronic physical fault in the electronic system, a physical impairment that would cause an electric circuit malfunction? Is that, or are you saying there is a physical defect, an actual impairment in terms of a cut or a some sort of a friction point that gets thin and there's a short that occurs because of that?
Okay, first of all, you have to understand a little bit about the fail-safe strategies that they have in place for all accelerator pedal position sensors that vehicle manufacturers put on. Typically, they try to run circuitry that is redundant. In other words, and if you look in the preliminary report, you can see an example of this. They run a separate. They actually have two signal circuits within the pedal position sensor itself. Each has their own power supply, each has their own ground circuit, and each has their own signal circuit back. The reason for that is so that one circuit is able to verify the integrity and work with the other. Do I make myself clear? Okay. It's
Yeah,
like
I took electrical engineering.
Okay, great.
I made C's, but I did.
Okay, great.
I did take it.
It's like having a witness. One signal is a witness for the other to make sure that both are exactly on track, so that whatever's being sent to the vehicle's onboard computer, it's exactly correct. Okay. With that said, if for some reason that circuit becomes compromised, shorted to power, shorted to ground, or shorted signal to signal, then at that point you should be able, within the vehicle's computer, to detect that circuit abnormality and set a DTC. Okay? That would allow the vehicle to turn on an MIL, or malfunction indicator lamp, warn the driver, and...
Well, there should be, to be non-technical, if something starts going wrong in the circuitry, there should be a default program that stops the engine.
Exactly, and that's the other thing that happens.
Applies the brake. That's what the Toyota engineers told me. He said, if something goes wrong, we give the brake circuit power over the accelerator circuit so that it stops the car. And
that's not
true. That didn't happen in Mr. and Ms. Smith's case.
That's not true with all Toyota vehicles at this point. They're in the process of reprogramming their vehicles' onboard computers to introduce into this fail-safe characteristic. It's important to note that the fail-safe is going to be looking at two driver inputs instead of just one from the accelerator pedal. Logically, why would you be driving down the road at 60, 65 miles an hour, or maybe even faster, with your foot on the brake and your foot on the accelerator pedal at the same time?
Well, logically you shouldn't. But
logically you should not.
But if something
was to fail, what is, I'm looking at intuitive for people driving. When something fails like that and your vehicle starts to accelerate on its own, your first intuitive thing is to step on the brake.
Correct.
So at that point, if we have an incorrect signal going into the vehicle's onboard computer, plus the application of a brake, the PCM would say, hey, we've got a problem, shut her down.
Right. And that didn't happen in their case.
It's
I know my time is
about
expired. Last question, and hopefully we can really get into this later in detail. To do the test that you did you physically impair the electronics of the cars you tested in any way?
As far as changing their driving characteristics, no.
I'm not talking about to create these faults or shorts. Did you cut anything?
No, sir. The only thing that we did was we tapped into the accelerator pedal position sensor circuits so that we could monitor voltages and modify those circuits in such a way that we could manipulate, if you would, the signals going to the onboard.
But in layman's term, your hypothesis is it is possible there could be a computer malfunction, and it is possible if they don't have this default mechanism that overrides it, in the absence of the computer knowing exactly what to do, it just doesn't do anything, and
takes the command as
the renegade signal runs away.
It takes the command as one that's valid, and as a result of that, it opens the throttle.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Ms. Smith, let me ask you this question, if I may. When you were driving down the highway and your vehicle was a runaway vehicle, you said you put your vehicle in reverse?
Yes, I drove my...
And what happened when it went in reverse?
Nothing.
Mr. Smith, was the transmission ripped up or anything when you got the vehicle? I mean, if you're going close to 100 miles an hour, you throw your vehicle in reverse, you're going to be dropping your transmission.
My suggestion to her was put it in reverse, hold on, hopefully the transmission will yank loose, and you'll survive the crash.
Okay.
And no, sir, the transmission didn't yank loose.
Let me ask you this then. You also state in your testimony that when the record driver, you're standing back there, you put it in neutral?
Yes, sir.
And the vehicle started up?
Yes, sir. It attempted to start. The
engine started up
4 times, yes.
Right. Should it start, as a general rule, in neutral?
Absolutely will.
Because you didn't have the fob, right?
That's exactly right.
Okay. Mrs. Smith, in your testimony, you have attached the documents provided committee in Exhibit B, in which you received a response from Toyota. Is that correct?
The response from Toyota about the...
Yes, dated December 4th, 2006. It was from Toyota, sent to you and your husband on your complaint. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in there, do they say, if properly maintained, the brakes will always override the acceleration?
That's what it says.
Okay. And in this case, they talked about your incident. 2 totally different systems would have to fail at exactly the same time, the throttle linkage and the brakes. And if properly maintained, the brakes would always override the acceleration. Is that what they told you?
That's the letter I got. That's what they told me.
All right. Mr. Gilbert, Dr. Gilbert.
Yes, sir.
You heard the Smith's testimony. You heard their incident. In order for that to occur, as the Smith said, would 2 totally different systems would have to fail at exactly the same time, the throttle linkage and the brakes? Can you defeat those systems?
Without, actually looking at the transmission and what is allowable under normal conditions, it is possible that at that highest speed, for safety reasons, because obviously if you go down the road,
right,
throw your transmission in reverse, it's not a very good thing.
Correct.
That may not have been allowed by the transmission controls.
Okay.
So it is possible that maybe reverse wasn't a good choice.
Was or was not a good choice?
Was not. And neutral would be my choice.
Okay, but you already did that. That didn't work.
I don't know exactly how
right,
that could happen.
Without an override.
Well,
I guess what I'm trying to get at, you have, I believe they say there's 4 fail-safe systems here in these Toyotas. So, having been a police officer and spent a little time doing this, if I'm going 100 miles an hour and I throw something in reverse, my car's coming to a halt. And you're right, there's going to be a pretty good crash, and I hope I can survive. That didn't work here. So obviously something's wrong here.
Yeah,
if you get in reverse.
I can't answer exactly what's happened in her case without,
When your car is on a wrecker and you come to put it in neutral so you can tow it, the engine should not start up and start revving, should it?
No, sir, it should not.
Okay. So besides all this electronics, we just got some basic mechanics that, at least in this car, is not working. Mr. Kane, you said you went to the public record and looked at NHTSA's public records, and you saw 2,263 incidents, if you will, of sudden unattended acceleration. Half of those could not be explained away, or if my math is pretty good, that's 1,131 cases can't be explained away. So if it's not the pedal sticking, if it's not the mat, what else can it be under this electronic throttle control system. What else is left? Electronics, right?
I think that, when we look at the complaints and you eliminate the physical impediments that could possibly cause this, and in this case, remember, the physical impediments are very limited because we have all electronics controlling these cars, and you rule out the driver error issue, you have only one thing left, which is the control systems of these cars. In interviewing many, many consumers and reviewing incidents of complaints, what we're seeing is incidents that cannot be explained by either one of the sticky pedal or by the floor mat recall, simply because the drivers and witnesses have often seen this, including folks who have actually brought them to Toyota dealers, and the dealers have witnessed the cars racing without any driver, without any floor mat interference, and without any sticky pedal.
So for these 1,130-some incidents, you've sort of ruled out the physical part, according to what you've seen.
You can never conclusively rule out physical just from all of those complaints, but certainly the evidence suggests very strongly that there's more going on. Again, one of the things that has happened in this crisis is the consumer voice has been tamped down. And you heard from the Smiths. Their story is very similar. What they report, they're told, is not credible. Consumers' complaints have been used against them to saying it's not credible. These are scenarios where folks get into are urgent, and people certainly can make mistakes, but there are too many problems that continue to be reported by consumers that are consistent and can't be explained away as simply driver error or some kind of physical impediment.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. My time has expired. Mr. Burgess, for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank you to the Smiths for sharing your very compelling story with us. I've always wondered what would happen if I inadvertently went into reverse going down the road. And I've always been fearful of accidentally doing that. Now, to understand that nothing happens, I guess I don't know that I'm mollified by that. Mr. Gilbert, let me ask you a question on this. You said that you did these tests that you and Mr. Barton just went through, and that you concluded that this may be a very serious problem.
Yes, sir.
And you called Toyota, and they took some time getting back to you. But they did get back to you?
They got back with me. I explained the situation in detail. I told them even, a resistance value for them to begin testing with. They asked me for that, and so I gave it to them. And they said that they would look into it and get back with me. But, of course, I've not heard back from them to date. I've not heard back from him.
Okay. So what was the length of time between the moment the light bulb went off above your head and Toyota got back with you about getting more information?
Well, first off, I wanted to be careful that I wasn't, crying wolf. And so I wanted to make sure that what I had found was repeatable, and of course I wanted to look into the literature to see how in the world could this possibly fall within the guidelines of setting a DTC. In addition to that, I wanted to test it on another vehicle. I should state for the record that the Toyota Tundra that we worked on was clearly labeled as a prototype. And so as a result of that, it could be somewhat different. So I tried it on another vehicle and had very similar results. And at that point, I become very alarmed.
Okay. So from that point to the point where Toyota gets back with you, what sort of time interval are we talking about?
Probably a matter of a few days.
A few days.
Yes.
Now, were you satisfied with the response that you got from Toyota after talking with them?
Initially, I expressed the concern. Days went by, and I didn't hear a response back, but then I did, and the gentleman I spoke with at Toyota had set up a conference call with some design people to look into it. He took it very seriously, or expressed his concern.
Well, if you weren't satisfied that things were proceeding with correct dispatch, at any point did you consider calling the federal agency, the NHTSA folks?
Actually, almost simultaneously with that, I sent an electronic letter to NHTSA through their hotline, and also a written a letter, and it was registered to.
And their response to you was?
I've not I got a response back on the electronic version that said, thank you very much for your concern, and we'll look into it.
So to the best of your knowledge, they've not duplicated your tests at this point, or?
I'm not sure what's...
Let me ask you a question. Here we hear this compelling story of this harrowing high-speed chase down the freeway, and what would you expect to see? I mean, if you were called on the scene after the car was pulled away to the resale lot, what would you expect to see? Would you expect to see, I mean, is there like a bundle of wires? Are there cable holders? Would you expect some chafing? Or what would you be looking for to see the real world, how the real world event occurred with the theoretic that you produced in the laboratory?
Okay, if I may, I'll use an analogy that I use in class a lot of times. If you're sitting at home watching your television and the television screen blinks, do you take it in for repair? No, you don't. How come? Well,
problem solved.
It just blinked once.
Yeah.
Okay. However, if you're dealing with electronics on a car and it blinks once, it could be a very serious thing. And in this case, it might have blinked.
But I guess if I understood your answers to Mr. Barton's questions, there would have to be some breach in the insulation. There would have to be two wires coming in contact with each other, or could this all be a fault of the computer chip and the logic employed therein?
If you review the service information, you will see that typically, what is our problem? Our problem is we need to ensure that the integrity of what's being sent to the computer is consistent with what's being done, and everybody's on the same page. So the problem lies in where does the problem lie? It can actually be in a number of places. It could be within the sensor itself, the APP sensor itself. It could be within the wiring itself.
Would there be any diagnostic feature which someone could look at that and say, here's a problem with the sensor?
Possibly. Okay.
The problem being a breach in insulation, or a...
It could be, but it may not be an obvious problem. It may be something that's in a microchip somewhere that's malfunctioned. But if you will, if you look at the report...
Yeah, and here's our problem. See, we just got your stuff really late in this sequence, like 10:13 this morning.
If you will look, please, on page 5.
Of which document am I looking at?
The preliminary report.
I've got several with your name on it.
Should be a picture there. Looks similar to this. Hopefully got the right one. Do you see it?
Yeah, we're there.
If you'll look at the printed circuit board, if you will, that is a microchip. Essentially, both of those electronic circuits are contained within that small, tiny chip. I'm told by Toyota, when I talked with them, I asked the question. I said, are those two separate circuits within that microchip? And they assured me that it was. Those are in very...
I'm going to break you off because I've gone too long. The chairman's going to smack me. Have you done this on any other make or model of car besides Toyota products?
As far as this type of test?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And?
They are able to detect a circuit abnormality almost instantly.
And what is it about the Toyota design that doesn't allow it to detect that abnormality? The proximity of the two sensors?
I would say it's not so much the proximity of the two sensors, but the strategy that they use to detect circuit faults between the two. These two voltages rise together on a plane as you increase the accelerator pedal opening. As a result of that, if they're somehow interconnected, because these are signal circuits, it's all about voltage. And if those two are somehow interconnected through a resistance or a defective chip or chafed wiring, bad connection, I don't know. I need to have a vehicle that's actually failed to investigate further under normal conditions.
And have you had the opportunity to inspect a vehicle like the Smiths that has actually failed?
Exactly.
Have you?
The fact that, have I?
Yes.
No, sir, I have not.
Okay. I know our time is up. Let me just ask you, Mr. Chairman, and I realize I'm just the acting member, so I don't know the rules very well, but we did just get Mr. Gilbert's testimony very recently. Would it be permissible to ask him to remain with us through not the next panel, but the panel after that, and perhaps some things will come up when Mr. Lentz testifies that we'd like to get clarification, and Mr. Gilbert would be able to participate in that? Would that be permissible?
Well, I'm not going to guarantee we're going to call Mr. Gilbert back. I'm not sure what his plans are, but time's up. We're going to go on to the next one. If Mr. Gilbert wants to stay around, there may be a possibility to recall. That would take unanimous consent of the committee to do that.
Very well. Thank you.
Mr. Dingell for questions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. No questions this time. I'd like to express my sympathy and condolences to the panel members who have suffered personal or family losses.
Mr. Dingell, Mr. Gingrey for questions, please.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and for Mr. Kane and Mr. Gilbert, but also I want to express my gratitude to the Smiths for being strong and brave and coming before the committee and explaining to us the harrowing experience which you went through, Ms. Smith. Listening to Mr. Gilbert, it's almost like I'm thinking of Marissa Tomei and my cousin Vinny as you start explaining some of these things to us about what happened to the car. But I feel like the judge, actually, listening to that testimony. Can either of you please explain the differences between the electronic throttle control system used by Toyota and those used by other makes which also have the electronic throttle control system? Is there any unique difference?
The most unique thing that I detected with the throttle, the accelerator pedal strategy, if you will, for verification of the two signals is the fact that those two signals rise on the same plane in unison, separated by a given amount of voltage. I might also add that difference between those two voltages is very, very small according to their, is allowed to be almost exactly, if you will, the same voltage. They only have to be separated by 2/100ths of a volt to still be considered by the vehicle's onboard computer as correct. With that said, if you look at some other vehicle manufacturers, and one of the first electronic throttle systems that I investigated was one that was made by Honda. And I actually did some training in Atlanta, Georgia for the Honda training instructors, where I investigated how it worked, fail-safe properties and that sort of thing, and basically gave the Honda instructors some information so that they could use in their classes. As a result of that, I was able to look at a lot of different differences between the two. And the thing that's interesting, and if you'll look, there's I did include a different, if you look on page 13, there is an example of the rising planes for Toyota. And then if you look at the very next page in the upper right-hand corner, that is a typical example of what you might find on a Ford or a Honda or some other manufacturer.
Well,
now, significant difference between that. Okay?
Mr. Gilbert, you're getting me a little bit confused. I was just simply going to ask you to tell me what a ute was, but let me go ahead and Toyota maintains that their electronic throttle control has built-in redundancies and sensors, and that if there was a problem with a sensor, the car's computer would recognize the different signals and it would go into this so-called fail-safe mode.
Yes, sir.
Can you identify a point when Toyota should have realized that the problems their cars were experiencing were not mechanical, but they were probably electrical? What is the signal that Toyota missed in this instance?
If I might refer to the exponent report, one of the things that I thought was interesting about that report was the very thing that I did to introduce a fault within the system was exactly the thing that they left out of their report. They did 19 tests, but they did not do a circuit analysis of a short between the two circuits, between the two signal circuits. And that was one of the things that I did very upfront, was to see if those two circuits could be somehow intertwined or interconnected. Now, the reason I did that was because they rose on the same plane of voltages. If I would have done that on a Buick or a Honda, it's quite possible that vehicle's ECM, as soon as it detected any circuit connection and saw those two voltages not operating within their normal plane of operation, it would have set a DTC or a code.
Either Mr. Kane or Mr. Gilbert, is Exponent involved in your talks with Toyota?
I'm sorry, is Exponent what?
Exponent.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the
Exponent?
Yeah, are they what? I didn't hear the
Is Exponent involved in your talks with Toyota?
I don't believe they were involved. They may have been on the phone. We don't know. Let me, if I can just step back, because I think we can help answer your question. In looking at, is the Toyota system different than other electronic throttle control systems? I think at what Dr. Gilbert's identified is, in fact, yes, it is. It's different in a couple of key ways. First of all, it's different in that with the way it's designed, it's very strategy in how they detect error codes has a wide window of opportunity where errors can be introduced into that wide window without setting an error code. This is in stark contrast to some of the other cars that have been examined. Now, again, the report is preliminary. Dr. Gilbert's been working literally around the clock to help document as much of this as possible. And what he has found so far is, in fact, other manufacturers' cars do not have that same strategy. They employ a multitude of other strategies to ensure that a DTC is set, so the error code is, in fact, set under these conditions. So you don't, in other words, load that gun, because what Toyota has in their system is essentially a sensor that goes into non-fail-safe. So now whatever happens to that sensor, whatever that sensor reacts to, the computer's just going to do what it says, because there's no fail-safe any longer. So there is an outlier.
Well, do you believe that, Mr. Chairman?
Much more, because we have a lot of witnesses on our second panel, and we really need to try to move as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And you have the right, Mr. Gingrey, to submit additional questions, and we'll attempt to have those answered if you prefer. Chair recognizes Mr. Rush at this time for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kane, how many years have you been following this area of concern here? How many years have you been following the issues surrounding automobile safety?
Well, I started this work back in 1991 at the Center for Auto Safety, and sudden unintended acceleration has been a controversial and difficult issue since the very day I stepped into this problem.
As recently as last month, you released a comprehensive report regarding NHTSA's history and pattern of treatment of sudden unintended acceleration. Is that correct?
That's accurate.
And I want to note that your study reached similar conclusions as this committee's preliminary investigation, and that is that NHTSA did not prioritize consumer concerns about sudden unintended acceleration and did not conduct thorough investigations into the possible causes of these incidents. Do you concur with that conclusion?
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think when you look at what happened, and I don't take lightly my criticism of the agency, because frankly, I've worked very closely with a number of the folks in the defects office. They work very hard. They have an impossible job. They're always chasing a constantly moving technological environment that is moving at a rapid pace beyond oftentimes what their resources allow them to deal with.
Thank you, and I totally concur with that. But my question is, under the current authority that NHTSA has, what more could NHTSA have done to protect consumers in this area? And what is it that you would like for them to do? And following that question, are there actions that you would like for NHTSA to see NHTSA take, but that they may not be legally authorized to do? What can we do as we look forward to reauthorizing NHTSA to make it a leaner, meaner fighting machine for the American consumer?
Well, that's a real good question, and we've looked at this very closely, and I can say that one of the things that really needs to happen, because we often are evaluating the very data that NHTSA has as well, and we can reach some different conclusions. But what at the end of the day, I think they really need to pay close attention and use the tools that are already there. I think a number of errors were made in the process of these investigations, not so much that the tools weren't available as much as the tools were not employed. When we look, for example, at surveillance systems like the early warning reporting system that this committee was involved in following Firestone, the use of that data in a meaningful way would help have triggered some investigations into the electronic throttle control. Doing statistical analyses of the complaints like we did with the quality control systems folks, their analyses have given us, again, the very public data we have access to, have given us the tools to look in the right direction. So it's the informed information we use to then go do our investigations, and I think that those tools need to be employed more properly. and the consumer voice has to be heard. This is a very controversial issue. Since day one, when I started working on these issues, sudden acceleration has consistently been blamed on drivers. We have a report from NHTSA from 1989 that was thrown out in response to a most recent defect petition. That report, frankly, is irrelevant to today's technology, and the fact that it really points mostly to driver error issues. We have to listen to the consumers. What are they saying, and listen carefully. And I think what we've heard in our interviews with many consumers who've experienced firsthand NHTSA investigators, the NHTSA investigators came in with a very preconceived notion that this could not possibly happen. They took Toyota's word for what happened, that this can't possibly happen. And that's really what concerns us, is that the investigations need to be open-minded without the preconceived notion, and the tools need to be in place. And furthermore, the counsel at the agency must be willing to sink their teeth into complex issues, even though they may take time and a great deal of effort to pursue to get to an end.
Does NHTSA have the authority? Do they have the personnel? Do they have the resources to accomplish what you've laid out, in your opinion?
Yeah, clearly. I mean, the agency's always the underdog here, and we certainly, I can empathize being an underdog in a small company working against the tide. You have to really use your resources well. And I know the agency struggles with that. They certainly could use the technological expertise, or certainly be able to reach out more frequently, have the ability to reach out more frequently to folks that have the expertise, like we were able to do when we reached out to Dr. Gilbert and he reached out to us. We can move quickly in doing that without the bureaucracy, and I think that the agency would benefit from the ability to do that, again, particularly in this rapidly moving technological environment today.
Do you have any additional comments along those lines?
I don't believe so.
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes a gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Sullivan, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In Mr. Kane's statement, he states this is to you, Mr. Gilbert. He states that you are commissioned to test Toyota's electronic throttle control system. What direction or parameters were you given? And what was the purpose of the study?
The purpose of the study was to, and that's what I outlined in my report. Okay, the purpose of the study was to basically contribute to a better understanding of electronic engine controls and the system malfunctions. That was the purpose of that. Okay, because of what I had discovered with the anomalies, if you will, within the fail-safe capabilities of this electronic throttle control system. That's where I focused my preliminary report, and so that's what I looked at, was how can a fault occur, or how could a fault occur within this system, this particular system, that could possibly not be detected by the vehicle's onboard computer and lead to some sort of an unsafe condition.
What directions were you given?
Pretty much freedom to do whatever I needed to do.
Okay. And when did you start your work?
Good question.
Well, I think if I could jump in here for a moment, I think Dr. Gilbert and I, we had some communications between him and my engineer in our office over a period of time, and he reported his findings. My inclination at that point was immediately that he was onto something interesting, and we said, great, what will it take to get you to investigate this further? And Dr. Gilbert indicated he needed some additional tools, and he needed a little bit of time because he had some vehicles, and we authorized him to do whatever he needed to do to document this as quickly as possible. And he and I were both very concerned about the public safety aspect of this, which is frankly why we have very little parameters. We simply were all putting together a Herculean effort to get some testing done and to document what we could, because clearly there is a diagnostic strategy within Toyota that is appearing to be an outlier. Now, again, I want to emphasize, do we know that this is the cause of unintended acceleration? The answer is no. We have a bookend here with Dr. Gilbert's work. We have a bookend on this end with consumer complaints. And the interesting part is this matches up against what Dr. Gilbert's telling us. Are there other possibilities? Absolutely. We have always, from the very beginning, we've maintained that this problem is multifaceted and multi-root cause. There is no one singular problem here. But what Dr. Gilbert is pointing out to us is informing us to look at the next steps.
Maybe if I could expand on that a little bit. You know, my curiosity was first piqued by watching the news media and the, you know, the publicity that was going on about that. And I had first called Mr. Kane, and I believe it was November or something, with just a casual conversation, some questions to about it. And, it kind of piqued my interest, and that's why I went ahead and looked into it on my own. There was no agreement between us to do anything. I just simply investigated. When I found what I did initially, the first thing I did was I drafted a letter to NHTSA. I contacted Toyota, and then I also contacted Mr. Kane to tell him of what I had found. Literally within seconds, I had an email response back from Mr. Kane, and that's where it proceeded from then. And he was willing to give us whatever we needed equipment-wise and that sort of thing to jump ahead, if you will, into investigating that. And so that's what I did. With approval of the university, we proceeded into research.
Well, Mr. Gilbert, were you told when you began your work that this may be used in preparation of litigation?
I assumed that that's where it could go. Okay, my main search was for the truth. If you would have said that I'd be sitting here today, I would have been really floored. But my main purpose was to get to the bottom of this, and that's where I would like to be. I would like to take this research a little farther.
Also, how many vehicles across how many brands or manufacturers did you do similar tests on?
Have we done? Currently, to date, within this research, and of course it's not included in this report, but we've simply, we've looked into a Buick Lucerne that we have. We've looked into a Ford F-150. We also have a Chrysler product that we are, have planned on using. We just simply ran out of time to be able to do the type of exhaustive testing that we need to be able to, because other systems are different. We have to approach their strategies from a different direction. None were quite as easy as the Toyota to crack. And as a matter of fact, the Buick Lucerne, we've not been able to do it. Anything close to what we've done with this.
And Mr. Gilbert, how does Toyota fix the problem you demonstrated in your study?
How would they fix it? My first recommendation would be the brake pedal fail-safe, where if the accelerator input was high, along with the brake pedal application, that the vehicle would go back to a fail-safe mode, set a DTC, and reduce power. That's the first thing that needs to be done. They need to be reprogrammed. And currently, to my understanding, some vehicles have that, some do not. Some are scheduled to be reprogrammed, some do not, are not. The next thing that needs to happen is they need to reevaluate their fault detection strategy in this area. They either need to tighten the parameters, change the strategy altogether, or do something to ensure that the type of problem that I've been able to introduce into this system is detectable. By detection, that means that then the fail-safe reduced engine power and that sort of thing is now in play.
Gentleman's time's expired.
Thank you.
Ms. DeGette for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I really want to thank you for coming today. I think the thing that's got to be the most frustrating is this horrible thing happened to you and then nobody believed you. We had the same situation in Colorado around the same time, where we had a family a mother of young children. She was driving a Prius, and this happened to her on the highway in the mountains. And she went, and she did what you did, Mrs. Smith. She went off the highway and drove into some trees so that she wouldn't hurt anybody else. Luckily, she lived. But the same thing happened. The Toyota lawyers sent them letters saying it's, obviously it was some problem with your maintaining the car because there was nothing wrong. So thank you for, it's hard for you to sit here and say this and for people to deny your credibility. So I just want to say that. I have a couple of questions for you, Mr. Gilbert. You heard the Smiths talk today about what happened, and I'm sure you've read their testimony as well. Is what Mrs. Smith accounts as happening with her car consistent with a floor mat failure in your experience?
I think we need to be perfectly clear in that floor pedal or accelerator pedal entrapment with a floor mat is considerably different than what I've.
So your answer would be no?
Restate the question, please.
Yeah. Is what she testified happened to her car consistent with a floor mat problem?
It's
yes or no?
It's more consistent, it sounds to me.
Yeah. Would it be consistent with a floor mat problem? Yes or no, if you can?
I would say no.
Okay. Would it be consistent with an accelerator, an accelerator? Her problem, an accelerator sticking?
Sticking?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like that to me.
Okay. Would it be a problem with the brake, some kind of a worn brakes or something like that?
I might address the brake statement a little bit further.
Sir, I apologize if you can make it short because I only have 5 minutes. Thanks.
If the brakes are applied while the vehicle is going down the highway and the throttle suddenly snaps to wide open throttle, you have two things to overcome. Not only do you have the kinetic energy of the vehicle moving forward that you got to bring to a halt, but you also have the full power output of the engine. At that point, brakes are going to get very hot very quick, and they're going to start to fade fast.
But would the original problem be caused by a brake problem? Of the acceleration that Mrs. Smith
No, brakes don't have anything to do with the acceleration.
Right. Okay. Now, here's something you might not know. Just today, Toyota's lawyers told the committee staff that Toyota was able to duplicate your tests. The Toyota lawyers also said that they had the same outcome that you had in your tests, but with no error codes. But they also said the conditions that you imposed on your testing were, quote, sabotage because you manipulated the electronics to make that happen. And they claimed that this could happen if you, quote, sabotage any car. Can you talk very quickly about, or no, let me ask you this. Could what you did to those Toyotas to get that outcome happen to Toyotas in real-world conditions?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay. And now, certainly most of us aren't engineers. I never even got a C in any kind of engineering class because I never took one. Can you explain the types of conditions that might cause these results in the real world?
It could be an anomaly in the accelerator pedal sensor itself. It could be a problem within the wiring harness. It could be a problem within the vehicle's onboard controller as well. The important question to ask here is, if I am able to interconnect these two signals, it is possible that accelerator pedal position sensors could have been mismanufactured from the very day that they were built. The fail-safe detection capabilities of the onboard computer are going to accept that as valid.
Right.
And so it's possible that mismanufacturing of some component along the line has somehow compromised the safety.
So it could happen in the real world.
Absolutely.
Okay. And is it significant to you that Toyota's independent consultant confirmed your tests? Does that make a difference to you?
They said that they were able to duplicate my conditions without setting a DTC.
Yep.
I think that's significant. They should look at that and say, why didn't it?
One last question. Why do you think Toyota wasn't able to figure this out previously?
maybe they didn't ask the right questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Doyle for questions.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll be brief. Just one question. To the Smiths, thank you so much for your testimony today. We appreciate you being here. Mr. Gilbert and Mr. Kane, you said Toyota will be introducing a software fix or some sort of patch to institute a fail-safe where if the accelerator and brakes are both on, the brakes win. But you also said that not all cars could be updated with this patch. What do you think Toyota should do for the cars that are on the road that can't be easily updated? I mean, is this something where NHTSA should be called for some sort of a hardware fix or to swap the CPU, or how do we deal with the cars that aren't easily addressed with this software patch?
Well, you know, I think that raises a question from the very get-go: is what are the technological problems that give rise to that? I mean, frankly, these vehicles have substantially similar electronic throttle control systems going back as far as 2002, and I have not heard that there is a technological obstacle to installing a brake to override. It's something we have advocated independently of Dr. Gilbert and his work. We believe it is a critical safety omission on behalf of Toyota that has led us in part to where we are today, simply because there's no driver control in the event of a runaway engine. Dr. Gilbert and I have talked about this subsequently, and it's something that has to happen. The technological obstacles need to be looked at closely to see if they're legitimate.
Do you have anything to add to that, Dr. Gilbert?
I think it's important to note that the very initial problem needs to also be addressed in that the fail-safe detection capabilities of this electronic throttle control system apparently fall short of where they need to be. The fail-safe, or the brake pedal override, if you will, is just an added measure of safety in the event that if for some reason this circuit was not detected as being defective, then at least the driver has some second course of action that should force it into a fail-safe mode. That's exactly what I want. And there may be there may be possible that other vehicle manufacturers may want to address this same situation as well. And I'm told that there's a number of them that do.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Ms. Christensen for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, thank all of you for being here, and particularly the Smiths. Mrs. Smith, and I'm not clear. In light of the recalls that have happened now, have you been contacted by your dealer, the district field technician, NHTSA, or anyone to rectify the problems that you've gone through over the last couple of years?
Have I been contacted by anyone since?
Yes. You got no response from your dealer, from the technician, and from NHTSA over the last few years. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
In light of the recalls, has anyone come back and contacted you?
No, ma'am.
No. And we've been told, I think, that in case of unintended acceleration, what should happen is to apply the brake, put the car in neutral, and bring it to a safe stop. Isn't that what you did? Would that be helpful?
I tried.
And it did not stop the car. So
no,
that
it did not. But also, I think there's something I didn't mention. Of course, you on the panel know about my letter, but this car also something electronic. It was doing the revving up and down also, and I think other people in this room did not know that. But my car, even when it was parked on the side of the road, and I was trying to push that button to stop it, it was still revving up and down. So that was another little extra nice thing there about the electronics. So
yeah. I did read that in your testimony. I had a question about the brake override, but I think that was answered. Mr. Kane, you're laying most of the blame on Toyota, and I'd like to know, in your experience, looking at your experience with Toyota and their response or their lack of response, what is it that you have generally seen in your work with other manufacturers? Is this the usual response, way that it...
That's a good question. I mean, we've certainly seen other manufacturers try and push these safety measures down. I think what's particularly troubling is that Toyota holds a special place here in the United States amongst owners. As you know, we've heard from many of the members here that Toyota is a lauded brand. People look to Toyota as being the most reliable company, as a company that we all can stand behind, and that we know that their products are reliable. And I think what is the crisis that we're in today is in part because that vaunted image that they've created is not meshing with their response, and certainly not the response they've given to consumers. And that's particularly troubling, and I think that's why we've seen them fall so hard and so fast.
But the answer to your question, though, because while Toyota's on the spot today, your response from other manufacturers has been similar?
Unfortunately, in crises, we see manufacturers act in ways that often ignore some of the public safety issues that need to be out front. That's been my experience.
Okay. Unless Dr. Gilbert has anything to comment on that question, I have no further.
I would like to comment on a statement that Ms. Smith has made. She mentions the fact of the engine revving. Okay, one of the things that the onboard computer will do is if the RPMs of an engine get to a certain limit, in order to keep from destroying the engine, the rev limiter will kick in. And what that will do is it will give a very pronounced audible revving of the engine. This is consistent with a situation where wide open throttle exists.
Well, thank you for that clarification. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Braley for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, you graciously accepted the responsibility earlier in your testimony of speaking on behalf of the people who weren't alive to tell their stories of what happened with the sudden acceleration that they did not anticipate. And I want to thank you on behalf of all those people for having the courage to come tell your story. But as you have sat here throughout this hearing, I'm struck by the fact that you both seem like reasonable, intelligent, articulate, sophisticated people, and yet every time you raised a concern about this problem, people treated you like you were crazy. So speaking for all those consumers who have gone through similar frustrations, I want you to tell this committee what it's like to know that you're not crazy, that you know what happened, and have nobody in a position of authority who's willing to do something about it.
Well, made us very, very angry. And I tried, and my husband, and tried so hard to send it out to the media, and I knew no one would listen to me as a little person or to my husband. So I knew from the very first, and so I even, you don't know, some of the movie stars and Oprah and all those big people, I thought if I can just get them to get onto this, because I knew I couldn't fight, we could not fight a big company like that. But we got no response from that. But to be treated like we were, there's no words to express the anger that was there. I mean, to even get slapped in the face time after time, and to literally, and to be literally be called liars, which we are not. But what are you going to do? We did all we could do.
Well, and I congratulate you for that. I think you should have called Joe Pesci and Marissa Tomei.
You got that.
And I want to talk about that
You got
movie.
that.
I want to talk about My Cousin Vinny with Mr. Kane and Mr. Gilbert. It's probably one of the best movies on trial advocacy and engineering I've ever seen. And one of the scenes, a classic scene in that movie, is when they're sitting in this rundown hotel room arguing over who is responsible for a leaking faucet. And Marissa Tomei, Mona Lisa Vito, the character of that movie, says to Joe Pesci that she turned off the faucet. And he said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "I'm sure." And he said, "Are you sure you're sure?" And she said, "I am." And one of the reasons that scene is so important is because I have right here the reference manual on scientific evidence that's used in federal courtrooms all over the country to deal with scientific evidence and engineering. And there's a specific chapter in here called Success and Failure in Engineering that gets right to the heart of that faucet scene. It talks about the role of failure in engineering design. Failure is a central idea in engineering. In fact, one definition of engineering might be that it is the avoidance of failure. When a device, machine, or structure is designed by an engineer, every way in which it might credibly fail must be anticipated to ensure that it is designed to function properly. But gentlemen, if you completely exclude from your analysis one potential problem that might be contributing to sudden unanticipated acceleration, you're not doing your job as an engineer, are you?
Absolutely.
And one of the things that we know is that, and this is something that's true in a lot of disciplines, not just engineering, but another part of this manual says, one of the apparent paradoxes of science and engineering is that more is learned from failures than from successes. Isn't that true in the fields that both of you work in, that it's the rigor of a discipline of repeated testing and ruling out of potential causes that lead you to the ultimate truth of what's causing a problem?
Yes, sir.
And this same manual goes on and talks about how successful designs can lead to failure. And we've seen that where a product which is used on multiple applications, hundreds and thousands, maybe millions of times, does not encounter an outside event like the ones you've been talking about that will trigger a catastrophic incident that can lead to the sudden death of people like we've heard about at this hearing. And it's not that these companies are bad or that intending to build defects into the product. It's just sometimes the rigorous application of design analysis and failure analysis has not been applied to correct the problem. Do you agree with that?
Do. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's been one of the problems with getting to the core of this problem all along, is that we've been looking for mechanical failures that are a cheap, easy fix and haven't done the type of rigorous failure analysis to get to the heart of the problem, and I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Braley. That concludes questions by all members of the subcommittee. Oh, Ms. Schakowsky. Sorry, didn't see you there, Jen. You're recognized. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gilbert and Mr. Kane, you've both done extensive research on the electronic throttle systems of Toyota. Have you done any similar research on other brands? Do you intend to do so? Do you think that the problem that you found in Toyota might be common to other vehicles or present in other vehicles?
It is possible that there may be other vehicles that may use a strategy that's not ironclad as well. That requires a much more in-depth investigation of those systems as well. You got to remember that in order for you to be able to look into what it takes to set a diagnostic trouble code or a fault in this system, you first have to identify what the parameters are from the vehicle's manufacturers to allow such a thing to occur. Most of them are very, very tight. When I first started into this, I had a preconceived notion that it was probably going to be an impossible task. So you can imagine my surprise when I found it was as straightforward as it was to be able to introduce a fault.
Mr. Kane? Yeah, I think, generally looking at, as someone who does defect detection work and surveillance on problems in the field and using various data sets, there clearly could be problems with other manufacturers. But what's interesting in looking at these problems is that, we're now at a place where our regulations are still very behind the technology that's in these cars, that controls these cars. I mean, the fact that we don't have requirements, for example, for a brake to idle override on electronics, despite the recognition of the problems that can occur, maybe some shortcomings that could address that on a more broad basis.
Thank you. I wanted to ask the Smiths a question and add my thanks to both of you for being here. You absolutely did the right thing, and you went to Toyota and you went to NHTSA. It sounds like you went to Oprah. But you stated that prior to inspecting your vehicle, NHTSA seemed to have already decided that the event you experienced was caused by a floor mat trapping of your accelerator pedal, and you must have been surprised. You must not have been surprised when NHTSA's incident report blamed the floor mats for your harrowing experience. So Do you think that it was the floor mat that caused the unintended acceleration?
No.
The committee received a copy of a vehicle and incident site inspection memorandum for your vehicle drafted by Scott Yan, an investigator with NHTSA, on May 2nd, 2007. And Mr. Smith, halfway through the first paragraph, states that NHTSA states, quote, no electronic interrogation of any vehicle system was performed. That means that NHTSA decided that it did not need to investigate whether electronics played a role in your wife's experience. How do you feel about NHTSA's decision not to even inspect your car's electronic system?
Well, it was when I received that in the mail, I called Mr. Yan and questioned him about that. Because I told him all along, even when he came down, I said it was not my floor mats. My floor mats did not make all those other things happen to my car. They couldn't have. And I told him that something else needed to be checked out. The electronics needed to be checked out on that car. And I have a note, I don't know if it's on that original one there, but I have a note at the top that he told me that further investigation was going to be done on that type of vehicle, that it was an ongoing investigation.
And did you receive any further notification about what happened, or did you inquire about?
I received nothing else, and also at that point he said that he was being taken off of the investigation, and I thought that was rather strange.
Thank you.
So I never know. I just gave up on it then.
Right. Thank you, all of you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
That now concludes questions from members of the subcommittee. There are a number of members here from the full committee, as I recognized earlier, and they'll be allowed to ask questions. Mr. Booyer, questions, please. 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. For the purpose of open disclosure, just down the road from where I live is Lafayette, Indiana. Subaru makes the Toyota Camry there in Lafayette. I also personally know a lot of people who work on the line, and they are very sharp. They take a lot of pride in what they do. And I would also recognize, I don't care whether it's Toyota or any other company out there, if in fact they've done things to cover up an error, I assure you that their brand is blemished. And it requires good faith commitments on their part to then restore trust and confidence of people to buy that product. And so I can recognize that Toyota has to get off their heels and on their toes to do this. At the same time, with regard to open disclosure, I am uncomfortable here today, Mr. Chairman, with regard to some of the testimony. The testimony, the reason I say that is that one of the nice things about our advocacy system in America is that the truth will always come out, some way, somehow. And that we also have to make sure that the advocacy is pure. So, Mr. Kane, I'm uncomfortable with regard to your advocacy here today. I just want you to know that. And also that of Mr. Gilbert. Mr. Kane, and your firm, Safety Research Strategies, released a report on February 5th detailing a number of allegations against Toyota related to sudden unintended acceleration. You noted in your report that it was not funded by attorneys, consumers, advocacy groups, or experts interested in the subject matter. It was not produced for litigation against Toyota Motor Company. You would nonetheless like to acknowledge 5 attorneys who sponsored some of your research into sudden unintended acceleration in Toyota vehicles. You then go on and list the 5 firms. What does the word sponsored mean?
Well, let me tell you that.
No, what does the word
sponsor means mean? We have done work for these folks to represent the victims.
How much have you been paid by these firms?
Frankly, I have not a lot of calculation on that, but what I can tell you is
it $1 million?
No, sir.
Is it $500,000?
It is far less than it cost me to be here today. And
is it $100,000?
No, sir.
Then what is it?
I don't know the answer, sir. And
you don't know how much lawyers are paying you with regard to your report? Of these 5 attorneys of whom that have sponsored your research, how many of these law firms have right now are suing Toyota?
I believe every one of them, they represents a voice of a victim who's
Every
been
one
taken
of, so
at the problem that we are dealing with today. We are informed by those
so
victims.
you are acknowledging that you are being sponsored by 5 litigation trial lawyer firms of whom are suing Toyota. Is that correct?
If your intimation is that
no,
somehow,
that's not my intimation. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is
that is
correct.
correct.
That we have worked for those. And if
It
your intimation is that our
correct?
advocacy is somehow informed by...
Okay, hold on here.
This is
hold on.
Question.
Hold on. We can't be talking over each other.
Well,
let's at least
direct
try
him to answer a simple question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Then tell him he's not responsive.
You're non-responsive.
Okay.
I am responsive to your question, Congressman. I have answered your question.
Do you
I am
acknowledge
for those folks? And I have
hold on,
for them,
Mr.
and I
Kane.
do that with
Kane.
pride. Thank
Mr.
you.
Kane.
Here's my question to you. Do you acknowledge that the 5 law firms that have sponsored you are involved in litigation against Toyota?
That is accurate.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, with regard to Mr. Gilbert, I don't understand what the word, now we've kind of dissected what the word sponsored means. Sponsored means being paid. What does the word commissioned mean? Are you being, when Mr. Kane commissions you to do a report, are you doing it for free or are you being paid?
I'm being paid.
All right. How much money are you being paid for this report by Mr. Kane? Is it more than $100,000?
No.
How much money are you being paid by Mr. Kane?
Whatever he's paying me, it's not enough.
I can answer that question if you would like. I have paid
Mr. Kane, how much are you paying?
I have paid Dr. Gilbert $1,800, and I've sent him some technical equipment that cost me approximately $4,000, sir.
How much more money is to be paid?
We have entered agreement where at his time he will be paid $150 an hour for his service moving forward.
Moving forward. Okay. So what we have here is you are being sponsored by 5 law firms of whom are suing Toyota, and you have now hired someone to prepare a report that could also be used in litigation later on. Now, I'm getting a better picture. Now, with regard to this question about manipulation, Mr. Gilbert, in order for you, I don't understand what the word manipulation means. In order for you to, the vehicles that you use, are these vehicles that had an acceleration problem or they did not?
No, sir.
Okay.
Not.
So
these
you
were,
then
these
had
were
to
normally
manipulate. Did you cut 3 wires in order to manipulate this?
No, sir. The circuit remained intact from the accelerator pedal to the ECM. The only thing that I did, because of safety purposes, I tapped into those circuits so that I could watch them with an oscilloscope and understand what was going on. I might back up and say that I had the decision on whether to push the send button to NHTSA. I had the decision on my own to contact Toyota. I had the decision on my own to contact Mr. Kane. To be quite honest, at the moment that I discovered this, I was sick at my stomach.
Mr. Chairman, I think what you're doing here is the right thing. We will find the problem. There will be a lot of research done out here. I don't think this is just the starting point to find the problem. And I think America, Mr. Chairman, has learned that whenever, from the Dateline incident whereby they recreated the staged crash for the fuel tank, that when you manipulate to exaggerate and show that there's a problem, that doesn't work very well. But I believe that smart minds are actually going to resolve this problem, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you holding this hearing.
As the ranking member said, we've looked at over 100,000 pages of documents. We will continue to have further hearings in this area. This is probably the first of a number of hearings we will have.
Congratulations to you.
Next, Mr. Gonzalez is a member of the committee. Your turn for questions, please.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for this opportunity. I guess I need to start off by just making an observation that I think you can be a member of Congress, you can be a plaintiff's lawyer, and you can be a manufacturer, and we would all still have safety first. So I'll ask Mr. Kane and Mr. Gilbert, the fact that you have these relationships that have been explained, has that altered or modified any of your testimony here today? Mr. Kane.
No, it has not. We prepared our report at our own...
Just yes or no would be fine, Mr. Gilbert.
No, it is not.
All right. The Toyota Tundra plant, located in San Antonio, Texas, is not in my district. I represent half the city. But I would have been really proud to have had that particular enterprise in my district because of the type of corporate citizen that Toyota has been in our area, the opportunities that it's presented. But that doesn't mean that any individual or corporation is not going to be held to the same standard, whether they're in your district or not. Now, I do have a question. Mr. Kane, you would attribute sudden, unintended acceleration to floor mats in certain instances, would you not?
Absolutely. As we've said in our report, we agree that that can happen.
And Toyota has addressed that?
Very late, yes, they have lately.
They've addressed it. It is not an existing condition that you should be concerned about.
It is a problem they've experienced for years and they have not addressed it in all models.
You know, I do wish we were in a courtroom because I'd have the help of a judge, that you would answer the question succinctly without any editorializing. Unintended acceleration could also be caused by a sticky accelerator. You don't dispute that, do you?
Yes, I do.
You do dispute that the present corrective action being taken by Toyota on the sticky acceleration pedal is not.
That does not result in unintended acceleration as we have looked at unintended acceleration.
Well, it's going to be how you're going to be defined it. If it's going to be sudden, if it's going to be constant, and so on. But you're saying it has nothing to do. You're on the record today saying that a sticky pedal has nothing to do with unintended acceleration or maintaining acceleration at a certain point.
Maintaining at one point is different. It is not a sudden unintended acceleration, sir.
And we can get into that debate. But we've confused all of that, if you haven't noticed. But no one, and I'm hoping maybe other panels and other committees will go into the different distinctions of when you've hit the accelerator and it gets stuck, as opposed to when you don't even touch it and the car goes out of control. These are huge differences, which we're not even touching on, it's my understanding. So what I gather that what you're saying is what hasn't been tested might be a third culprit, and that's going to be the electronic system. That's what you're saying.
Yes, sir.
But at this point, you wouldn't go on record and saying that could be the only cause.
No, sir.
All right. Mr. Gilbert, have you ever heard of Leonard Evans?
No, sir.
And I hadn't either, to be honest with you, but he was on Linda Wertheimer's recent NPR program. And this is what he said, and I always believe this, and I think Click and Clack agree. The weakest brakes are stronger than the strongest engine. All right? So what happened to the Smiths, which wasn't their fault and totally out of control, it shouldn't happen to anyone. But if you applied the brakes with all the humanly possible pressure that you have, should it have stopped the car? Should it have brought the car to slowing it down or stopping it? And if not, why? What would cause someone to be able to put that much pressure on that pedal and not have any result whatsoever?
Okay. First off, let's ask the question. Let's say that the vehicle was at speed, 60 miles an hour.
Yes, sir.
It took a certain amount of horsepower to get there. Would you agree?
Sure.
Most of us don't drive our car at wide open throttle. Most of the time when you're driving down the interstate, you're looking at, a partial throttle opening at best. If you were at speed and the throttle snapped full open, you have two things to overcome. You have the kinetic energy that was built up in that vehicle to get there, which took a lot of power.
Right.
You also have now the full amount of the engine to try to overcome. And so at that point, and I believe that there's been some studies done about braking distances. Even if your brakes were sufficient to bring that car under control, it's going to extend the stopping distance considerably. And when you do that, the brakes start to overheat. The hotter they get, the less effective they become. Essentially, it's all a brake system does. It takes that energy that you stored in that car, and it changes it into heat as you apply the brake.
So that may explain what happened, but not necessarily that the brake computer malfunctioned at the same time that your accelerator computer. Because you have two different computers in that model, don't you?
Would you explain that, please?
My understanding is that you have two separate computers in that model car. Now, I may be wrong, and you don't have, I don't know if they had brake override or whatever, but that
your brake system is still hydraulic. Okay, excuse me. Your brake system is still hydraulic. Excuse me. Your brake system is still hydraulic, The electronics that we put in place on the brake systems are there primarily for analog brake purposes. They're for safety, so that you can steer without losing control of the vehicle. So it's possible that you could lose your anti-brake capability, but still have full brake application because of the simple hydraulics of the system.
All right,
That's
so the
way
brake
it
should work. And I'm over my time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being so generous.
Mr. Terry, for questions, please. No questions for Mr. Terry. Mr. Ross, is he still here or did he leave? Well, that concludes then all the questions of everybody on this panel. I want to thank the witnesses, the Smiths, Mr. Kane, Dr. Gilbert. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the hearing if you would like.
Let's just ask one more question before we dismiss this panel.
Mr. Burgess want to ask one more question. I know better because Mr. Burgess never asked one question. But we'll try it, Mike. Go ahead.
Mr. Gilbert, if I could just ask you to address what happened when that car was put into reverse? Why did that not seize up the transmission and drop it on the road?
Some transmissions are designed, and you're asking me to speculate here a little bit because well,
let me ask you this: is there anything that you have found that would have prevented the vehicle from engaging the reverse gear? Does it have something that stops it from going in reverse?
Hydraulically speaking, okay, and you need to talk to someone that works more on transmissions. I've not been into transmissions for quite some time, but there are a number of conditions where you don't want to go into reverse. And so it's possible that hydraulically or electronically that it was not capable of going into reverse at speed like that.
And then what about the on-off switch in the button in that car?
Yeah, I can't address that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, that now will conclude the questions for this panel. Thank you again for being here. It's been a long hearing so far, and we have two more panels. Let's adjourn, go in recess until 2:15. We'll be back here in 7 minutes. Let's give everyone a chance to stretch their legs. We are in recess.